There is a particular kind of rest that comes from a story you already know by heart. You do not have to follow it. You have followed it before many times, and so the mind is free to loosen its grip, to let the plot go soft at the edges while the voices stay familiar and close. Gravity Falls is well suited to this. Its world is small and warm, a wooden shack at the edge of a pine forest, a summer that never quite ends, 2 children, and a great uncle who is not entirely who he claims to be. You can drift halfway into sleep and still feel held by it because you know the turns of the road before they arrive. Tonight is about the things the writers kept hidden in plain sight. Every episode of Gravity Falls closes on a cipher, and the opening theme has carried a reversed whisper since the very first episode, a quiet line that once you play it backward does not talk about Stan at all. It simply hands you the key to the puzzle waiting in the credits, 3 letters back. Alex Hirsch has said the secret twin brother was the plan from the beginning and that the clues were planted from the start. So we will move slowly through those planted secrets, the ones the characters carry and the ones the series buries in its own margins, and we will take our time with each. Welcome to Pine Hat. There's nowhere to be for the next several hours and nothing you need to remember. Settle into whatever is soft near you, let the lamp go low, and let the sound of these secrets unfold at the pace of a slow evening. If you fall asleep before the end, that is exactly the point. Stay as long as you like and drift whenever you are ready. There is a certain kind of television show that rewards a second viewing and then a third, and then a viewing where you pause the screen and lean in close. Gravity Falls is one of those shows, and it was built that way on purpose. Alex Hirsch, who created it, has said something that sounds simple until you turn it over. He has said that Gravity Falls is a show about mysteries and magic, but that first and foremost it is a show about characters. Hold those two halves together for a moment because the whole design of the series lives in the tension between them. The mysteries are real and they are solvable. But every mystery, when you finally reach the bottom of it, turns out to be a person who is hiding something. Consider the largest secret Gravity Falls ever kept. For most of the first season, the audience believes it knows who Grunkle Stan is. He is the gruff old man who runs a tourist trap, who fleeces visitors and grumbles at his great-niece and great-nephew and seems above all ordinary in his dishonesty. And then much later, the series reveals that he has a secret twin brother and that nearly everything the audience assumed about his identity was standing on a false floor. The surprise matters less than the planning behind it. Hirsch has said this twist was the plan from the very beginning and that clues pointing toward it were planted going back to its first episode. The reveal was not a swerve invented to keep the series interesting. It was a destination the writers were steadily driving toward from the opening minutes, leaving markers along the road for anyone patient enough to read them. Think about what that kind of planning demands. If you know the ending on the day you write the beginning, you can afford to be generous with your clues, because you're not bluffing, and the very first clue is hidden somewhere most viewers would never think to look, which is the opening theme song itself. From the first episode onward, the theme song carries a reversed phrase, a small piece of audio folded into the music. And when it is played backward, it does not spell out any warning about Stan. It simply whispers the key to the cipher waiting in the credits, something as plain as 3 letters back. That message was there from the beginning, sitting in plain sight, telling the audience the truth about the whole series before a single episode of story had unfolded. Most people watched it hundreds of times and never saw it. The show was whispering its own solution and trusting that almost no one would listen closely enough to hear. This habit of hidden text runs through the entire series in a way that is worth slowing down for. Every episode of Gravity Falls closes with an on-screen cryptogram during the credits, a coded message waiting to be cracked. And the codes do not stay simple. In the early episodes, they use a Caesar shift, which is the simplest form of letter substitution, the kind a curious child could break with a pencil and some patience. As the series continues, the system grows harder. The show moves to @bash, then to a numeric substitution where letters become numbers, and later still to the Visionaire cipher, which is genuinely difficult to solve by hand. The puzzles were not decoration, they were a conversation with the audience that deepened over time, as though the writers were watching the fans get better at reading it and responding by writing in a harder hand. Now there is a principle underneath all of this that keeps the mystery box approach from curdling into a cheap trick, and Hirsch has stated it directly. One test fans have often pointed to for whether a planted twist stays fair to the audience is a simple question that seems to sit behind every episode. Would the episode have still been satisfying on its own, even without the cliffhanger? Sit with how strict that standard is. It means the secret is never allowed to be the only reason an episode exists. The character work, the jokes, the small emotional beats all have to stand on their own feet, so that the eventual reveal feels like a gift rather than a bill coming due. A mystery that only pays off if you stay for the ending is a hostage situation. A mystery that pays off along the way and then pays off again at the end is a piece of craftsmanship. The clues for Stan's true nature illustrate this exactly, because they are almost invisible until you know what they mean. There is an inconsistency early on between his name and the lettering on the license plate of his car, a detail so small that it reads as a mistake rather than a message. Later, in the episode Dreamscaperers, the audience is briefly allowed inside Stan's subconscious, and there, as a symbol, sits a broken two-child swing set. One seat, in effect, is missing its partner. Both of these appear well before the twin brother is revealed in the episode Not What He Seems, when a hooded figure finally steps out of the portal. Neither one announces itself. Each is the kind of thing you only recognize as a clue after you already possess the answer, which is precisely why they work. The show was not lying to its viewers, it was telling the truth in a language they could not yet read. The same patience governs a second buried secret, the mystery of who truly wrote the journals that drive the plot. In the episode Not What He Seems, the answer arrives when a hooded figure finally steps through the portal, a reveal that upends everything the audience thought it knew about who Stan really was. Old Man McGucket, it turns out, was once a brilliant inventor, a man who worked alongside the true author of the journal. Something went wrong between them, something the episode reveals in its own time, and afterward McGucket did the unthinkable. He built a device to erase memories, and he used it on himself voluntarily, which is why the man the audience has been laughing at has no memories at all predating the year 1982. The gag character was a tragedy the whole time. The show had simply declined to tell you until you were ready to feel it. And here the creator's methods reach beyond the screen in a way that is genuinely remarkable. By early 2013, some fans had correctly guessed the identity of the journal's author, and Hirsch decided to protect the secret by fighting misinformation with misinformation. By most accounts, sometime in early spring of that year, he anonymously leaked a fabricated photograph onto the message board 4chan, an image that appeared to show Old Man McGucket writing in one of the journals, planting a false answer to lead the correct guessers astray. He kept the deception running until that episode had aired, and only then did he reveal the hoax, tweeting out the uncropped version of the photo, the one that showed him posing beside the fake prop. The man was so committed to the fairness of the eventual reveal that he was willing to be temporarily unfair everywhere else, guarding the secret in the wild so that it could land cleanly on the screen. There is one more figure worth watching for, and he asks you to reconsider what a background is. Blandin, who is eventually revealed to be a time traveler, appears visibly in the background of episodes long before he is ever introduced as a character. He is standing there in the pilot, Tourist Trapped, and again in The Legend of the Gobblewonker, present and unremarked, a stranger in the crowd. Once you know he travels through time, his early appearances stop being an inconsistency and become the point. He was always there because in the logic of the story, he had already been everywhere. The show had drawn its own future into its past and left it in the corner of the frame, waiting for you to notice. Consider the particular danger of a child who is beloved. When Dipper and Mabel first meet their new neighbor, the town has already decided what he is. Lil Gideon arrives in the story fully formed as an institution, the adored psychic of Gravity Falls, a small boy whose reputation precedes him into every room. There is nothing to prove because the town has done the proving already. Affection is its own kind of armor, and Gideon wears it well. Before we know a single true thing about him, we know that everyone loves him, and that fact alone should make a careful listener slow down. Dipper, to his credit, does slow down. He does not trust the polish. What he does with that suspicion, though, is worth thinking about because it is not a noble act so much as a strategic one. It is Gideon who talks Mabel into that first date, not Dipper, and the reason she finally agrees is specific. She does not want to hurt his feelings. He wants her to question the authenticity of the psychic claims from the inside, to get close enough to a supposed mind reader to see whether there is any mind reading happening at all. It is a small manipulation in the service of exposing a larger one, and the series does not pretend otherwise. Dipper is using his sister as an instrument of investigation, and Mabel, for her own reasons, agrees to be used. What she finds on that date is not a trick exactly, it is a face. Mabel learns that the outwardly cute, cherubic demeanor Gideon presents to the world can fade very quickly, and that when it fades, something else is standing behind it. This is the first true thing the season tells us about him, and notice that it arrives through personal contact rather than through any supernatural test. Nobody catches Gideon reading a hidden card or missing a cold read. Instead, a girl on a date watches the sweetness drop away for a moment and glimpses the person underneath. The performance and the boy are two different things, and the gap between them is where the whole rest of the story will eventually pour through. To understand the performance, it helps to know where it came from, because Gideon is not an accident of design. The voice actor who plays him, Thurup Van Orman, has described the character as a parody of a particular kind of American figure, the tent revival miracle healer, the televangelist who lays hands on the faithful and promises to draw sickness out of the body. Van Orman named Benny Hinn specifically, and Gideon's look, the towering pale hair, the pale suit, the theatrical bearing, is built on Hinn's own. So the sugary child preacher of Gravity Falls is a cartoon grown out of a real and recognizable tradition of staged wonder, the kind of show where the healing is choreographed and the collapse into the aisle is rehearsed. That lineage tells you something about how to watch Gideon. His power was always meant to be understood as theater. There is an even earlier route, and it is quieter and stranger. The creator, Alex Hirsch, has said that the Gideon character was originally inspired by a real child psychic his mother saw on television. Hold that image for a moment. Somewhere there was, or seemed to be, an actual small child presented to an audience as a genuine reader of minds, and a woman watched it. And years later, her son turned that memory into a villain. The unease at the center of Gideon is not invented. It is remembered. The show is playing with the discomfort that predates it, the discomfort of watching an adult audience hand its belief to a child and ask that child to perform certainty back at them. So the psychic act is theater with two ancestors, the televangelist and the real televised prodigy. But Gideon is not only a performer, and this is the detail that keeps him from being a simple con man. He secretly possesses journal number 2, the second of Ford's research journals, and that is why his act is not entirely empty. The journal gives him access to real supernatural items and real knowledge, things that sit far outside anything a cold reader could fake. Chief among them is a mystic amulet that grants him genuine telekinesis. Think about what that means for the shape of the character. The public sees a psychic. Some of what the public sees is a trick, and underneath the trick is a second thing that is not a trick at all, a stolen book that hands a manipulative child actual power over the physical world. The fraud is a shell around something real, and that is far more dangerous than a fraud alone. The business context makes the danger legible. Gideon and his father, Bud Gleeful, run a rival tourist attraction called the Tent of Telepathy, and the series establishes it plainly as the Mystery Shack's competitor in the same small town. This is the frame the whole conflict hangs inside. 2 attractions, 2 showmen, 1 limited supply of gullible tourists. Stan Pines sells cheap wonder out of a wooden shack. Gideon sells cheap wonder out of a tent. The tent, however, has advantages the shack does not. It has the town's love. It has a child at its center who can weaponize that love. And it has, hidden away, a book of real magic. The rivalry looks like ordinary small business friction. It is not. One of the 2 competitors is holding a supernatural trump card and waiting for the moment to play it. The move against Stan begins with an attempt to open a safe. In the episode called Dreamscapers, Gideon is caught trying to break into Stan's safe, and rather than retreat, he escalates in a way no ordinary rival could. He summons the dream demon Bill Cipher and sends him into Stan's mind to find the safe's combination. Set aside for a moment how casually the series introduces a mind-invading demon into a summer comedy, and look at the logic of it. Gideon cannot get the combination from the outside, so he tries to steal it from the inside, from the private interior of another man's memory. The safe is a physical object, but the plan treats a person's mind as just another locked container to be cracked. That is the true signature of Gideon's method. Everything, including the inside of a human head, is a lock he believes he has the right to open. The plan fails, but only because it is fought off. Mabel, Dipper, and Seuss foil Bill Cipher's mission inside Stan's mind. And here the show makes a point about Gideon that it will keep making. When the elaborate scheme collapses, he does not stop. He resorts to what he calls Plan B. And plan B is dynamite. He blows the safe open himself and steals the deed to the mystery shack. Consider the distance between the two methods. Plan A was a dream demon walking through the corridors of a man's memory, delicate and invasive and almost elegant in its cruelty. Plan B is explosives. Gideon will use whatever the moment requires, the subtle instrument or the blunt one, and he feels the loss of the subtle instrument not as a defeat but as an inconvenience. The deed is what he wanted. The deed is what he takes. With the deed in hand, the manipulation stops being private and becomes public spectacle. Gideon unveils a plan to demolish the mystery shack entirely and replace it with a Gideon-themed amusement park, which he names Gideonland. The detail that gives this its particular flavor of cruelty is the mascot. He intends to feature Mabel's pet pig Waddles, dressed as the park's mascot. Read that as the psychology it is. Winning the business war and paving over his rival's property would not be enough for Gideon. He wants to take the beloved animal of the girl who once glimpsed the real face behind his sweetness and dress it in his own branding, to turn her affection into his advertising. The park is a monument to a boy's need to convert everything around him, land, animals, people, into extensions of himself. He also brings a justification, and the justification is instructive because it is so flimsy. Gideon claims the shack under a finder's keeper's law and produces the deed as proof that Stan supposedly gave it to him. Notice what he does here. He has just stolen the deed with dynamite, and he stands in public and reframes the theft as a gift freely given, wrapped in the language of a childish playground rule elevated to the status of law. This is the con man's instinct fused with the child's. He does not merely take. He constructs a story in which taking is his right, and he counts on the town's affection to make the story stick. For a while it does. The town has loved him for so long that his word carries a weight no evidence should give it. The consequences land hard, and the series is unusually willing to let them stay landed. The episode Gideon Rises opens on Gravity Falls engulfed in a mysterious shadow, and one of its first images is a wrecking ball striking the Mystery Shack sign, recreating the cliffhanger the previous episode ended on. This is loss made physical. The sign, the name, the cheap, proud identity of Stan's whole enterprise swings into view only to be hit. And then it does something devastating with Dipper. He wakes up screaming, convinced he has escaped a nightmare in which Gideon stole the deed and forced the family out of the shack and in with Seuss and his grandmother. He reaches for the relief of it having been a dream. Seuss confirms that it actually happened. There's no waking up from this one. The bad dream and the world are the same thing. What follows is the small, deflated life of people who have lost. The Pines stay at the house of Seuss's grandmother, displaced and idle, and it plays their reduced circumstances for gentle comedy rather than melodrama. Mabel, restless, calls the grandmother old lady soft and rubs her cheeks until Stan tells her to stop being creepy so that he can watch the news. It is a tiny domestic moment, and it does a great deal of work. These are people with nothing to do because the thing they did has been taken from them. Stan wants the news, wants information, wants some thread back toward the world he lost. And the best he can manage is to sit in a borrowed house and be interrupted by his granddaughter fondling an old woman's face. The comedy is real, and the sadness underneath it is real, and the series trusts you to hold both. Now we arrive at the mechanism, the answer to how a child could seem to know the private business of an entire town. Gideon secretly hands out branded pins to the townspeople, little tokens of belonging that are in fact hidden cameras. Through them, he spies on residents in their homes and their lives and learns the personal details that he then presents back to them as psychic insight. This is the whole trick laid bare, and it is worth sitting with how ordinary and how modern it is. There is no gift, only surveillance dressed as a keepsake. Every person who wore his pin out of love was carrying his eye into their own house, and every uncanny thing he seemed to pull from the ether was simply something he had watched them do. The tent revival healer, the child prodigy on television, the whole theatrical tradition Gideon descends from, all of it collapses here into a single sordid fact. He was not reading minds, he was watching bedrooms. The unraveling begins, fittingly, with a small malfunction and an old man's disability turned into an asset. Stan first realizes what the pins truly are when his hearing aid picks up audio feedback from one of them. Think about the smallness of that. Not a grand deduction, not a confession, but a faint electronic squeal bleeding into a device Stan wears because his ears are failing. The town's beloved psychic is undone at the first thread, by the accidental sensitivity of an old man's hearing aid. There is a rough justice in it. Gideon built his power on listening to everyone in secret, and the first person to catch the listening is a half-deaf man whose artificial ear happened to hear the wrong frequency. The exposure that follows is public and physical, and it mirrors the way Gideon operates by turning his own methods against him. At the climax of Gideon Rises, Stan kicks open part of Gideon's giant robot and reveals a hidden screening room inside it, a chamber full of the camera feeds Gideon used to spy on the town. This is the exact inversion of Dreamscaperers. There, Gideon sent a demon to open the private interior of Stan's mind. Here, Stan kicks open the private interior of Gideon's machine and shows the town what is hidden inside. The screening room is the truth of the psychic act made visible all at once. Wall after wall of stolen images, every private moment the town thought was theirs. And the crowd, seeing it, turns against him. The affection that was his armor for a whole season falls away in a single moment of sight, because love cannot survive the discovery that it was being recorded. The end is swift and almost anticlimactic, which feels right. Gideon is arrested. Before he is taken away, Stan shakes him and recovers both the stolen shack deed and journal number 2. Watch what Stan takes back and in what order the story values them. The deed is the thing the plot has been fighting over, the home, the business, the name on the sign the wrecking ball struck. But the journal is the deeper prize because the journal was the secret engine, the source of the real power that sat hidden beneath the faked one. Gideon loses both in a single shake, the paper that made his public claim and the book that made his private strength. Stripped of the surveillance, the amulet, the journal, and the town's belief all at once, what remains is only what Mabel saw on that first date, a small boy whose sweetness was always a face, now with nothing behind it and nowhere left to look. And so the arc closes on a symmetry that the series built with unusual patience. Gideon rose on watching and fell on being watched. He treated every mind and every home as a lock to be opened. And in the end, it was the opening of his own hidden chamber that finished him. The love of the town, which no evidence should have been able to buy, turned out to be exactly as fragile as the secret it was resting on. There is a lesson in there about performed certainty and the audiences that hand their belief to it, a discomfort many people feel watching child performers on television long before any of this was written. But it is content to let that lesson stay quiet, folded into the image of a defeated boy and an old man holding a deed and a journal, standing where a sign used to be. Consider first the house that Wendy Corduroy comes from, because the show gives us a father before it gives us the daughter's full shape. And the father tells us a great deal. Manly Dan is a lumberjack in a town that treats lumberjacking as a kind of local religion. And it introduces his strength as spectacle in an episode from the first season called Dipper versus Manliness. There is a machine in Greasy's diner, one of those manliness tester contraptions with a handle you are supposed to grip and haul on with your whole body, and Manly Dan defeats it using only his pinky finger on the manhandle. Not his fist, not his forearm, a single smallest finger applied almost casually, and the machine gives up. The win earns free pancakes for every customer in the diner, which is the series' way of making his strength communal, a thing the whole room benefits from and celebrates. It is a funny image, and it is meant to be. And this channel has looked before at how Gravity Falls uses that kind of exaggeration to hide something quieter underneath. But turn the image slightly and think about what it means to grow up in a house governed by that measure. The joke lands because the tester machine, an object built to certify a man's worth through raw force, is beneath Manly Dan. He does not merely pass the test, he humiliates the test with his pinky, and the whole diner eats pancakes over it. That is the standard of the household. That is the ambient pressure of the air Wendy breathes at home, long before she ever slouches behind the counter at the Mystery Shack looking bored. The wiki that catalogs these characters records a detail the episodes themselves only imply, and it is worth holding gently because it is the single thread we have into Wendy's childhood inside that house. According to the Gravity Falls wiki profile for Wendy Corduroy, her father had her compete in lumberjack games when she was younger, and in the phrasing the profile uses, she kinda ruled at it. Sit with that phrasing for a moment. Not that she loved it, not that she chose it, she was had to compete. In the passive construction, a girl entered into her father's arena of axes and logs and timed feats of strength. And she was good, she kinda ruled at it. The word kinda is doing an enormous amount of quiet work there. It is the sound of someone who succeeded at a thing without ever quite claiming it as her own, who won inside a game she did not design, who was competent at proving a kind of toughness that the household demanded as the price of belonging. You can hear in that one small biographical line the origin of the Wendy we actually meet, the teenager whose whole effect is coolness, distance, and unbothered ease, the girl who never seems to be trying because in the house she comes from, visible effort was the opposite of the goal. When your father can beat the manliness machine with his pinky, the lesson you absorb is not that you must strain harder than everyone else. The lesson is that real strength looks effortless, that it does not announce itself, that it wins and then hands out pancakes and moves on. Wendy's laid-back exterior is not the absence of the lumberjack household. It is the lumberjack household's ideal, translated into a 16-year-old girl who has decided that the way to survive that much pressure is to appear never to feel it at all. The casting matters here as well. Manly Dan is voiced by John DiMaggio, the actor best known for playing Bender on Futurama. DiMaggio has one of those voices that can make a single grunt sound like an avalanche, a low, mechanical rumble of appetite and force, and casting him as the father is a statement in itself. The house sounds like that. The house sounds like a machine that eats effort and produces certainty. And a child raised inside that sound learns very early which registers are safe to speak in and which are not. We do get, elsewhere, one glimpse of Wendy at genuine ease, and it is telling that it comes far from her father's arena. In a first-season episode called Bottomless Pit, inside a story Dipper tells titled Voiceover from the bottom of a bottomless pit, there's a small remembered moment on the porch of the Mystery Shack. Wendy is playing a game called Spin the Pig with Mabel and Seuss, spinning Waddles, the pig, right there on the porch near Stan. It is nothing, a nonsense game with no rules that matter and no father watching to see whether she rules at it. The place where Wendy looks lightest is a porch where a pig is being spun for no reason at all, in the company of people who ask nothing of her strength. The contrast writes itself. Home is the manliness machine. The shack is Spin the Pig. Now carry that girl, the one shaped by a house of proven toughness and relieved by the pointlessness of a spinning pig, into the relationship that the 17th episode of the first season puts under the microscope. The episode is called Boys Crazy, and it premiered on the Disney Channel on the 19th of April, 2013. It is, by most fan accounts, one of the episodes that spends the most time on Robbie Valentino, and specifically on the way Robbie tries to win Wendy back after he has stood her up. His chosen instrument is a song. Robbie gives Wendy a song, a track on a CD, presented as something he made for her, and fan and wiki sources have come to call this track Wendy's song. The gesture works, at least at first. The song succeeds in getting Wendy to agree to meet him at Lookout Point, which is the whole point of the gesture. Think about the shape of that maneuver on its own terms, before any of the supernatural machinery the episode later reveals. A boy stands a girl up, damages her trust, and then, rather than sitting with the discomfort of having hurt her, he reaches for a manufactured object designed to make her feel that she is uniquely seen. A song supposedly written for her, supposedly proof that he was thinking of her all along. It is a guilt trip and a flattery delivered in the same package, and it is effective precisely because it bypasses the argument they should be having, and goes straight for the feeling. Dipper, watching all of this with a jealousy he has not yet admitted to himself, becomes convinced that something is wrong with the song. He decides Wendy is being mind-controlled by it, and he investigates, and eventually he does the thing that a certain kind of suspicious mind always eventually does with a song it distrusts. He plays it backwards. And played backwards, the track reveals a hidden spoken message, a piece of backmasking buried under the music, and the message says something close to, "You are now under my control. Your mind is mine." It is a genuinely chilling little discovery, and the episode lets it play as horror for a while. Here, seemingly, is the proof. Here is the smoking evidence that Robbie is not merely a manipulative ex-boyfriend, but an actual hypnotist, that the song is a weapon, that Wendy's agreement to meet him was never her agreement at all. Dipper, armed with this, pulls Stan into it. The two of them confront Robbie and force him to play the hidden alternate track for Wendy at Lookout Point, so that she can hear for herself what is buried in the gift she was given. And this is where the episode performs the turn that makes it one of the smarter half hours the series ever built, because the confrontation does not resolve the way Dipper expects. Robbie, cornered, admits something that dismantles the entire mind control theory. He confesses that he did not actually like the song and did not write it himself. He passed it off as his own. The twist the episode is actually built around is that Robbie plagiarized the song from another band, and crucially, he had no idea it contained a backmasked message at all. The sinister voice under the music was never his instrument. He was not a hypnotist. He was a thief who happened to steal an object with something strange hidden inside it, and he was as ignorant of the hidden thing as everyone else. Pay close attention to what Wendy does with this information, because the writers were extremely careful here, and the carefulness is the whole meaning of the scene. Wendy breaks up with Robbie, but she does not break up with him because of the backmasked message. She does not leave because a spooky voice told her that her mind belongs to someone. She leaves because he lied about having written the song for her personally. The betrayal that ends the relationship is an ordinary human one, and it is far more damning for being so. He looked her in the eye and let her believe that he had poured himself into something for her, and it was a lie. And once she knows it is a lie, the gesture curdles into exactly what it always was: a manipulation dressed as devotion. This is the guilt trip mixtape in its truest form. The horror of it was never the hidden hypnotic phrase. The horror is that a boy tried to repair genuine harm he had caused with a counterfeit intimacy, a stolen song passed off as a personal one, and that this counterfeit very nearly worked. Wendy, the girl raised to prove her toughness in her father's arena, the girl whose whole style is unbothered coolness, was reachable through the one channel the Lumberjack household never taught her to defend: the wish to be seen as an individual rather than as a set of feats. Robbie did not need magic. He needed a plausible object that said, "You specifically matter to me." That the object was plagiarized is the entire tragedy of the character. The show's creator, Alex Hirsch, is often credited with having confirmed this reading, though the exact source of that confirmation is hard to pin down. By most accounts, it is Robbie's plagiarism and not any deliberate mind control that explains the hidden message, with the implication that it was never meant to carry real hypnotic power. There was no spell. There was a stolen song that already had a buried oddity in it, and a boy too dishonest and too lazy to have noticed. The supernatural surface was a decoy the whole time, and the emotional reality underneath was just a bad boyfriend and a lie, which leaves Dipper standing in a very uncomfortable position, and it knows it, and this is perhaps the bravest thing about the episode. The trivia around Boys Crazy suggests that the intended takeaway was that Dipper was sticking his nose where it did not belong, acting out of jealousy rather than out of any genuine impulse to protect Wendy. Think about what that does to the whole investigation we just watched. Dipper's mind control theory was not detective work. It was jealousy wearing the costume of concern. He wanted the song to be evil because he wanted Robbie to be a villain, because if Robbie were a hypnotist, then Wendy's feelings would not be real, and Dipper's own longing would have a clear enemy to defeat. The backwards message handed him the excuse he was hungry for, and the episode, rather than rewarding his suspicion, sharply indicts it. He was right that something was wrong with Robbie. He was right for entirely the wrong reasons, and his righteousness was mostly self-interest. That is an unusually honest thing for a children's show to say about its own protagonist. The boy hero investigates, uncovers a hidden message, confronts the rival, and forces the truth into the open. And the story he lands in is not a triumph. It is a lesson about the difference between protecting someone and policing them out of want. Wendy did not need Dipper to save her from a spell. She needed, and found on her own, the ordinary information that her boyfriend was a liar, and she acted on it with the same unshowy competence she once brought to her father's Lumberjack games. She kind of ruled at it, you might say, at the harder game of seeing through a manipulation, and she did it without any of the machinery Dipper thought was required. The casting around this episode deepens it in ways that are easy to miss on a first watch. Robbie is voiced by the actor and comedian T.J. Miller, whose vocal register gives Robbie that particular blend of surliness and neediness, the sound of a boy who is defensive precisely because he suspects he is hollow. Wendy is voiced by Linda Cardellini, an actress whose warmth and dryness give the character her grounded, unhurried quality, the sense of someone older and steadier than her years. Put those two voices in a scene at Lookout Point, the thief and the girl he tried to counterfeit his way back to, and the performances carry the whole meaning of the scene even before you parse the plot. One voice is performing sincerity, the other has stopped being fooled by it. And around the central story, the episode runs a subplot that rhymes with it more cleverly than it first appears. While Dipper chases his song, Mabel discovers that the boy band Several Times, the group she and Wendy adore, are not ordinary performers at all. They are vat-grown clones, manufactured and kept by their manager, and Mabel, horrified on their behalf, hides them in her room to protect them. Consider how neatly that mirrors the Robbie plot. Both stories are about manufactured objects of affection. Robbie's song is a counterfeit intimacy, a stolen thing passed off as genuine feeling. Several Times are counterfeit boys, grown in vats and passed off as real heartthrobs. The whole episode is preoccupied with the question of what happens when the thing you love turns out to have been produced rather than felt, assembled rather than born. Robbie assembled a gesture out of another band's work. The manager assembled a band out of biology. In both cases, someone tried to pass a product off as a person. There's a beautiful piece of casting hidden in that subplot as well. All 5 members of Several Times are voiced by Lance Bass, himself a veteran of the boy band NSYNC, working alongside Alex Hirsch and Matt Chapman, a real former member of a real manufactured pop group, lending his voice to 5 fictional clones of a fictional manufactured pop group. The joke folds back on itself with real affection, an insider gently commenting on the very machinery that once produced him. It is the same theme as the main plot, played for sweetness instead of betrayal. The clones are victims of their manufacture. Robbie's song is a weapon of his. So the chapter closes where it began, in the shadow of a father who can beat a strength machine with his smallest finger and buy the whole diner pancakes for the trouble. Wendy comes from a house that measures worth in visible feats of toughness, and she survived it by learning to make her strength invisible, to look unbothered, to rule at things without fuss and never claim the ruling out loud. When a boy tried to reach past that armor with a stolen song and a lie about having written it for her, the tools she used to see through him were not supernatural and were not handed to her by anyone. They were the same quiet competence her childhood forced on her, turned now toward the harder and more adult task of telling real feeling from a manufactured copy. She did not need saving. She needed the truth, and when it arrived, backmasked message and all, she reached past the spooky decoy and broke up with the liar for lying. That is the girl the Lumberjack household built, and it is the one thing about that household that reads, on this particular lens, as something close to a gift. Consider the figure who arrives in Gravity Falls not as a monster, not as a demon, but as an employee. Blandin. Blandin is a time traveler, dispatched from a future so distant that it is counted in the year 207,012, and he is sent backward across that enormous gulf for a reason that is almost comically ordinary. He is there to remove time anomalies. Power does not interest him, and revenge will not either, at least not at first. What he wants is to go unseen, and his entire purpose depends on it. He works for the Time Anomaly Removal Crew, a future organization tasked with extracting anomalies throughout time, and it does this work on behalf of a distant authority known as Time Baby. Think about what that arrangement implies. Somewhere far ahead of the present, a bureaucracy exists whose whole function is to reach back into moments like this, quiet Oregon town, and tidy up the ruptures in the fabric of things, and to do it without the people of those moments ever knowing they were tidied. He first appears in the 9th episode of Season 1, a half-hour called The Time Traveler's Pig, which premiered on the Disney Channel on the 24th of August, 2012. The premise of his assignment is small in scale and enormous in consequence. Blendin is assigned to prevent time anomalies from occurring during the town's Mystery Fair, an event of carnival rides and prize booths and the ordinary chaos of a summer festival. He is a caretaker of a single afternoon, tasked with making sure that afternoon unfolds exactly as it should, that nothing tears, that no thread pulls loose. And crucially, he is meant to do this invisibly. His job is the opposite of spectacle. The measure of his success would be that no one ever learned he had been there at all. That is what makes his role in the town's larger story so strangely interesting. Gravity Falls is a place built on cover-ups, on secrets kept beneath the surface of an ordinary town. and Blendin represents a particular kind of concealment. He is not hiding a monster in the woods or a machine in a basement. He is hiding the very idea that the flow of time can be managed, that there are hands reaching into the present from the future, correcting and erasing. His secrecy is procedural. It is policy. The crew does not announce itself because to announce itself would be to create the very awareness that produces meddling, and meddling produces anomalies, and anomalies are precisely what the crew exists to remove. The secrecy is not incidental to the mission. The secrecy is the mission, and of course, the secret does not hold. Dipper and Mabel discover Blendin, and they learn what he is. They learn that he is a time traveler, and with that knowledge comes temptation, because a time traveler carries a time machine, and a time machine is the single most dangerous object you could place within reach of two children who each have a summer full of regrets they would like to redo. So they do what children do with a distracted adult and a shiny thing. They convince him to go on a fair ride. And while he is occupied, spun around inside the ordinary machinery of the carnival, they steal his time machine. Consider the neatness of the irony. A man sent across 200,000 years to keep a single afternoon from fracturing is undone by a carnival ride and two 12-year-olds. The guardian of the timeline is separated from his tools by the exact kind of small human mischief he was sent to guard against. What follows is the heart of the episode's cruelty toward its own agent. Dipper and Mabel's meddling causes the very time anomalies that Blendin was sent to stop. He came to prevent a rupture, and his presence, his machine, his momentary lapse, becomes the cause of the rupture instead. And the future does not forgive him for it. He is arrested by the Time Paradox Avoidance Enforcement Squadron for violating the Time Traveler's Code of Conduct. Notice the layering here. There is a crew that removes anomalies, and there is a separate squadron that enforces the code among the travelers themselves, and internal police for an already secretive body. The future that reaches into Gravity Falls is not a single hand. It is an institution with divisions, with rules, with punishments. And Blendin falls afoul of it not through malice but through failure. He is punished for an outcome that was engineered by the children he was supposed to protect from themselves. And so his last note in that first appearance is not the calm of a job completed, but the sourness of a man wronged. He swears revenge on Dipper and Mabel for stealing his time machine. It is worth pausing on how sympathetic that is. He is, in this telling, a victim. He did his job badly, yes, but he did it badly because two clever children exploited his good nature, and then the machinery of his own world came down on him for the result. The revenge he swears is the promise the show keeps, the seed planted for a return, and it transforms him from a one-episode obstacle into a recurring presence with a genuine grievance. There is a small, strange detail in the making of him that deepens the character in hindsight. Blandin is voiced by Justin Roiland, who would go on to co-create Rick and Morty, a series entirely preoccupied with time, dimensions, and the casual devastation of cosmic travel. There is something fitting in that voice belonging to this particular anxious functionary of the timeline, a nervous man doing an impossible job inside a universe far larger and stranger than he can manage. The performance carries a fretfulness that suits a person whose entire existence is spent trying to keep enormous forces from noticing small mistakes. His return arrives in the 8th episode of the second season, Blendin's Game, which premiered on the 10th of November, 2014. By now, the grievance he swore has had time to curdle into purpose. Blendin escapes the infinitentiary, the prison, whose very name suggests a sentence measured against eternity, and he is pursued once more by the Time Paradox Avoidance Enforcement Squadron. But instead of simply running, he reaches for a mechanism inside his own world's law, a way to settle his grievance formally. He invokes Globnar, a gladiatorial contest overseen by Time Baby himself, and he names Dipper and Mabel as his opponents. Think about the escalation this represents. In his first appearance, he was a caretaker of order. Now he weaponizes the order itself. He does not merely seek revenge in the shadows. He calls upon the highest authority of the future, the same Time Baby whose crew he served, and demands a sanctioned combat against the two children who ruined him. His secrecy has given way to spectacle, the invisible agent stepping into an arena watched by the ruler of time. And here the show makes the choice that defines its own moral character rather than his. Dipper and Mabel defeat Blendin and Globnar. Having won, they hold the power to punish him, to end his grievance on their terms. Instead, they choose mercy. and the specific shape of that mercy matters. They choose to have his time agent job restored and to have his hair regrown rather than punishing him. Consider what that says about how they understand him. They do not see a villain to be crushed. They see a man they broke, a functionary they stripped of his position and his dignity, and given the chance to inflict harm, they instead return to him the two things they took, his standing and his self. The job is the restoration of his place in the secretive order of the future. The hair is smaller, almost a joke, and yet it is the restoration of his person. They fix what their own younger recklessness had unmade. It is a rare thing for a story to let its wronged antagonist be made whole by the very people who wronged him. That could have been the end of him, a grudge resolved, a man restored to his quiet work of keeping the timeline clean and unseen. But Gravity Falls has a way of folding its smaller secrets into its largest one, and Blendin's fate becomes a piece of its greatest catastrophe. During Weird Mageddon, the collapse of order that consumes the town in the series' final movement, Bill Cipher secretly possesses Blandin. He uses him as a disguised pawn, wearing the body of the nervous time agent to get close to and break open the rift containing Bill himself. Here, the whole architecture of concealment turns back on itself with terrible precision. Blendin's defining trait, the thing that made him useful and the thing that made him vulnerable, is that he moves through the world unseen, an agent of a secret order that no one is supposed to notice. And that invisibility is exactly what makes him the perfect disguise for the demon. The man whose job was to keep anomalies from tearing the world open becomes, without his knowledge, the instrument that tears it open. The guardian of the seal becomes the hand that breaks it, and the cruelty compounds. While possessing Blendin during the first part of Weird Mageddon, Bill Cipher kills Time Baby. Follow the full arc of that single act. Time Baby is the distant authority on whose behalf the crew does its work, the ruler who oversaw Globnar, the power at the top of the entire secretive future order that Blendin serves. And that ruler is destroyed by a demon wearing the body of one of its own agents. The organization that reached back through 200,000 years to keep the present clean and quiet is, in effect, decapitated by way of one of its most loyal and least significant members. Blendin, the small man who only ever wanted to do his job unseen, is made the vessel through which his own god is murdered. There is a bleak, quiet tragedy running under his whole appearance in the series when you lay the pieces side by side. He begins as the embodiment of a benevolent cover-up, a future that tends the past invisibly for the past's own good. He is wronged by children, punished by his own institution, and then, remarkably, restored by those same children. And in the end, the thing that made him what he was, his unremarkable invisibility, is the exact quality of far greater evil needed in order to do what no anomaly ever could. The secret he was sent to keep, that hidden hands manage the flow of time, becomes the doorway through which the timeline's own keeper is killed. He is never the author of any of it. He is the one it happens through again and again, a caretaker undone first by mischief, and at last by something that simply put on his face and walked toward the rift. Consider what a man keeps in his own mind when he trusts nothing else to hold it. In Dreamscaperers, the 19th episode of Season 1, Stan locks the shack's deed inside his safe, and when Gideon comes for it, Stan tells him, in effect, that the combination is perfectly secure because it lives in one place only, and that place is his own head. It is meant as a taunt. It is also, though he does not know it in the moment, the exact shape of his whole life. Everything that matters to this man is stored where no one can reach it. The problem, the thing the episode understands, is that a mind is not a safe. A safe has one door. A mind has many, and some of them can be opened from the inside by someone who was never invited. Gideon, humiliated and chased off, does not accept defeat the way an ordinary child would. He reads from the second journal, and from those pages he summons a dream demon named Bill Cipher. And he does this for one narrow purpose, to send something into Stan's mind that can walk to the safe and read the combination off the walls. See it as the violation it is, a burglary of the head rather than the house, of the last private room a man like Stan believes he still owns. And the children, Dipper and Mabel and Saus recite their own incantation from the third journal and follow, physically entering Stan's mind to stop the demon's takeover. So there is this strange convergence, an enemy and a family, both crossing into the interior of a man who has spent his existence making sure no one ever could. The episode plays it as adventure. Watched again from a distance, it reads as a rehearsal. The show is testing the idea, long before it pays it off, that Stan's secrets are not merely in a box in a room. They are in him. What was he protecting so fiercely? The first season never quite says. It lets you assume the ordinary thing, that he is a cheap and grumpy old showman guarding a tourist trap and a deed. The second season takes that assumption apart. In Not What He Seems, the 11th episode of Season 2, government agents named Powers and Trigger arrive and arrest Stan, and the charge they bring is not petty. They accuse him of stealing several dozen drums of toxic chemical waste. That is the surface of it, the thing with handcuffs and a warrant. But the real exposure is not the arrest. It is what the children find while he is gone. Dipper discovers a hidden box, and inside the box are dozens of fake state identification cards and passports, and every one of them wears Stan's face beneath a different name. Picture the children holding these in their hands. Not one false document which might be explained away, but dozens. A small archive of invented men, each with a life the twins never knew existed. And underneath, or alongside, an old newspaper clipping with a headline that reads, "In the series, Stan Pine's dead. Their great-uncle, the man who fed them and housed them and told them tall tales all summer, faked his own death decades earlier. The person they have been living with is a rumor of a person, kept alive by paperwork he forged himself. The aliases are worth sitting with because they are absurd and they are also a kind of autobiography. Across the series, we learn of Stetson Pinefield, of Hal Forrester, of a man called Andrew 8-Ball Alcatraz, and of Steve Pinington. Say them slowly and you can almost hear the improvisation in them, the way a man on the run reaches for a name that sounds real enough to survive a glance and no longer. Some of them keep a piece of the true name buried inside, Pinefield, Pinington, as if even in disguise he could not fully let go of what he was. These are not the identities of a master criminal building an empire. They are the identities of someone staying one town ahead of the last mistake, again and again for years. And the record behind them is real, at least within the world the series and its surrounding lore build. According to the character history kept by the Fandom that has cataloged this series, Stan had been jailed 3 times, and he was legally banned from 32 of the United States because of what he had done to earn those bans. Hold that number for a moment. A man forbidden by law from setting foot in nearly 2/3 of his own country, who then finds the one small town in the one remaining corner where no one is looking for any of the names he has used, and plants himself there, and builds a business out of lies that are, for once, harmless. The Mystery Shack, with its fake exhibits and its inflated ticket prices, is the most honest thing he has ever run, because everyone walking in already knows it is a con and pays anyway. The show did something almost cruel to the people watching it in real time, and it shaped how this secret landed. Not What He Seems aired on the 9th of March in 2015, and it ended on the discovery of those fake identities and that clipping, with the truth of who Stan actually was, left dangling. The direct continuation, the episode built to answer every question the box had raised, did not air until the 13th of July of that same year. 4 months. For 4 real months, the audience held the same box the twins held, knowing only that the kindly old fraud was a far deeper fraud than anyone guessed, and not knowing what kind. It was a cliffhanger measured not in the length of an episode, but in the length of a season of a person's actual life. Whatever answer arrived in July had to carry the weight of that waiting. The answer, when it came in the 12th episode of Season 2, reframed everything the fake identities had implied. The man the twins call Grunkle Stan is not named Stanford at all. His real first name is Stanley. He assumed the identity of his own twin brother, the real Stanford, after Stanford vanished through an interdimensional portal. And he wore that stolen name the way he wore all the others, except this one he wore for 30 years and never took off. So the dozens of false faces in the box were the small lies, The largest lie, the one that hid in plain sight, was the name over the door of the shack and the name the children had been calling him all summer. He was impersonating his missing brother to everyone, including the family who loved him. And the episode does not let him off easily, because the loss was partly his own doing. It shows that a young Stanley, in the middle of an argument, punched Stanford through the newly activated portal, and then spent the following 30 years secretly running the shack under his brother's name while trying, in whatever hidden hours he had, to reactivate the machine and bring Stanford back. That is the engine underneath all the fraud. Every fake passport, every jumped state line, every year of pretending to be a dead man and then a lost one, sits on top of a single, unbearable fact that he lost his brother by his own hand and could not tell a soul and could not stop trying to undo it. The cons were how he stayed free enough to keep trying. The stolen name was how he kept the shack, and the shack was where the portal was. There is one more piece the episode places at the very beginning of the chain, and it explains the shape of the man more than any wanted poster does. The twins' father, Stanley, and Stanford's father disowned Stanley and threw him out of the house, blaming him for wrecking Stanford's prize-winning perpetual motion machine, the project meant to carry the gifted brother to a bright and documented future. So before the aliases, before the jails, before the 32 states, there is a boy told by his own father that he is the one who ruins things and cast out on the strength of that judgment. Everything downstream, the drifting, the false names, the willingness to become anyone because being himself had already cost him his home, follows from a door closing on a kid. The man who insisted his safe was secure because the combination lived only in his mind was taught very early that whatever he kept inside himself was the only thing no one could take or throw away. Set the two great exposures side by side, and you can see how carefully the series arranged them. In Dreamscaperers, the threat is that someone will read his secret straight out of his head, and the secret they are after seems to be nothing grander than a safe combination guarding a deed. In Not What He Seems, the secrets come out not through his mind but through his things, a hidden box and a yellowed newspaper, physical evidence of a hidden life. The show approaches the same locked interior from two directions, once through the dream and once through the drawer, and only after both does it hand you the name, Stanley, that makes the locked interior make sense. His mind and his wanted posters, the private vault, and the public record converge on one truth he had spent decades keeping in pieces. There is a detail from outside the series that gives all of this an unexpected tenderness. The series creator, Alex Hirsch, based Grunkle Stan loosely on his own paternal grandfather, a real man also named Stan, whom he described as a big, gruff, tall tale-telling fellow who wore gold chains with his shirt collar open. Whatever the fictional Stan did, the character was drawn from love, from a grandson remembering a large, loud man who told stories that were probably not entirely true and were wonderful anyway. That, in the end, is my own reading of why the fraud never curdles into villainy. The tall tales of the Mystery Shack and the tall tales of a grandfather are the same instinct, the impulse to entertain, to embellish, to be a bigger and better character than the plain facts allow. Stanley Pines simply took that instinct and, out of grief and guilt and a father's rejection, aimed it at the machinery of the law instead of at a dinner table. He became dozens of men because the one he started as had been told he was worth throwing away. And the whole time, in the only vault he trusted, he was keeping the combination that would bring his brother home. There is a man who lives in a junkyard on the edge of Gravity Falls, and the town has a name for him, though it is not really a name so much as a dismissal. The crazy old man, the Gravity Falls Wiki, cataloging the series' population with the flat neutrality of an encyclopedia, introduces him the same way the town sees him, as an old, deranged hillbilly living among the scrap and rust. His full name is Fiddleford Hadron McGucket, and by the time we meet him, he seems to have very little use for it. He mutters and climbs on things, carrying himself like a man whose thoughts arrive out of order and leave before he can finish them. And the strangest fact about him, the one that reorganizes everything, is that this incoherence is not where he began. It is where he was sent. Consider how the series first invites us to misread him. In the 7th episode of Season 2, Dipper is chasing the question that has driven him since the first summer day he found a hidden journal in the woods. Who wrote these books? and his suspicion lands reasonably on the old man in the junkyard because a certain kind of ruined genius fits the profile of an author gone into hiding. But when Dipper presses him, McGucket cannot help. He says in effect that he has no memories from before the year 1982. There is a wall in his mind, and everything on the far side of it is dark. It lets that answer sit as a curiosity, a symptom of an old man's decline, when in fact it is the first visible edge of a deliberate erasure. What Dipper and Mabel find that episode is not a hermit's ramblings, but an institution. Behind a fireplace in the Gravity Falls Museum of History, tucked inside the exhibit devoted to the eye, there is a hidden hideout, and the hideout is the headquarters of a cult. The Blind Eye Society. Think about the location for a moment, because the series clearly wants you to. A museum is a building whose entire purpose is to preserve memory, to hold the past where people can come and look at it. And behind one of its walls, a secret order has been doing the exact opposite, taking memory apart and hiding the pieces. The method is what makes the society so eerily horrifying. They have a ray gun, and the gun does not destroy a memory so much as extract it. Each removed memory is caught and held in a glowing glass tube, a small bright artifact of someone's forgotten experience, and the tube is then fired through a pneumatic system, the kind of vacuum tube arrangement an old bank might have used to send paperwork between floors into a room they call the Hall of the Forgotten. Picture that room. Shelves of softly glowing tubes, each one a moment somebody used to own, sorted and stored and labeled. An archive of everything the town was not permitted to keep. The cruelty of it is almost tender. Nothing is thrown away. It is simply taken from the person it belonged to and kept somewhere they will never think to look. And then the episode delivers the turn. The founder of that secret order, the inventor of the memory-erasing gun, the mind that designed the tubes and the hall and the whole careful apparatus of forgetting, is the crazy old man from the junkyard. Fiddleford McGucket built all of it. The man who cannot remember his own life before 1982 is the architect of the machine that erases lives. He did not stumble into this ruin. He engineered the thing that ruined him, and then he used it on himself again and again until the engineer was gone. To understand how a person arrives there, the series takes us backward to an episode late in Season 2 devoted to the brothers' history. The flashbacks show us a different McGucket entirely. Not a hillbilly, not a wreck. A computer engineer working in Palo Alto in the 1970s, in the years when that particular stretch of California was becoming the center of the world's technological imagination. He is sharp and competent, exactly the kind of person you recruit when you are building something that has never been built before. And Stanford Pines recruits him, pulls him north to a project buried beneath what would eventually become the Mystery Shack, the construction of a portal meant to open a door between dimensions. McGucket is not a bystander to Ford's great work. He is the hands and the engineering mind that help make it real. This is the fact that the junkyard buries. The town's crazy old man was once a brilliant man's brilliant assistant, the collaborator on the most ambitious and dangerous experiment either of them would ever attempt. When you hold the two images side by side, the Palo Alto engineer and the muttering figure in the scrap heap, the distance between them is not the distance of ordinary aging. Something specific happened in that gap, and the series is careful to show us exactly what. During an early test of the portal, something goes wrong. McGucket is accidentally pulled partway into the machine, drawn in alongside a test dummy, and for a moment, before Ford manages to haul him back out, he sees the dimension on the other side. We are not told in these facts what he sees. The show does not hand us the image, and it does not need to, because what matters is the effect. Whatever waited beyond that portal did not merely frighten him. It broke something. He comes back out of the machine, a man who has looked at something the human mind was not built to hold. And here the story becomes, in the end, a story about a partnership dissolving under the weight of ambition. Traumatized by what he witnessed, McGucket wants to stop. He asks Ford to abandon the project, and Ford refuses because the portal is his life's work, and he cannot bring himself to walk away from it. So McGucket walks away instead. He quits. Understand what that costs a person. He does not leave because he stops believing in the work. He leaves because he has seen where the work leads, and his friend has seen the same warning and chosen to keep going. The collaboration ends not in a disagreement about facts, but in a disagreement about whether some knowledge is worth the price of having it. But quitting does not undo what he saw. That is the trap McGucket falls into. He carries the memory of the portal out of the lab with him, and it does not fade. It becomes paranoia, it becomes insomnia, nights without sleep, a mind that will not stop replaying the thing it cannot bear to have seen. And so the engineer does what engineers do. He identifies a problem and he builds a solution. The problem is the memory. The solution is a gun that removes it. He invents the memory erasing device first for himself, a single desperate man trying to cut one unbearable image out of his own head so that he might finally rest. There is a terrible logic to what follows, and the show lets you feel the whole slope of it. Having erased his own trauma, McGucket does not stop. He founds the Blind Eye Society, and he turns the gun outward, offering the same relief to anyone in Gravity Falls who has seen something supernatural, something the town's strange nature was never supposed to reveal. He comes to believe that forgetting is a kindness, that the townspeople who glimpse the impossible are better off with the glimpse removed, protected from their own experience. It is a philosophy of mercy, and it is monstrous. And the reason it is monstrous is that he tested it first on himself and could no longer see clearly enough to know what it was costing, because the gun has a price, and McGucket pays it in installments over years. Every time he turns it on himself to smooth away another sleepless memory, another intrusion of the past, he takes a little more than the memory. Intelligence goes with it. Coherence goes with it. The precise engineering mind that could design a device to edit human recollection is slowly edited down by the very device it made until the brilliant man is gone, and what remains is the figure the town knows. The crazy old man in the junkyard is not a stranger who replaced Fiddleford McGucket. He is what is left of Fiddleford McGucket after the memory gun finished with him. The wall at 1982, the darkness before it, the muttering and the incoherence, all of it is self-inflicted, dose by dose, in the name of protection. There is something worth sitting with in the fact that Alex Hirsch, the series creator, voices Old Man McGucket himself. Hirsch also gives voice to Grunkle Stan and to Seuss, and so the same person who built this world speaks through several of its figures, including this one. The ruined genius muttering in the scrap. It is a small production detail, but it means that the voice of the man who forgot everything belongs to the man who invented everything about him. The author speaking in a broken register as his own most thoroughly broken creation. The show does not leave him in the junkyard. When Dipper and Mabel and the others expose the hidden order and take it apart, they do not simply shut the cult down. They begin to help McGucket recover what he lost, to reach back across that wall at 1982 and retrieve the man who has been missing for decades. It is a slow thing, a beginning rather than a cure, but it is the reversal of everything the gun stood for. Instead of firing memories away into the hall of the forgotten, they start bringing them home. And the recovery holds. By the finale, Weird Mageddon 3, Take Back the Falls, the transformation is complete in a way that feels almost like justice. McGucket has his memories back and his intelligence with them. He has grown wealthy by patenting the inventions of a mind that finally works again. And when the town's defenders assemble to assault Bill Cipher's fortress, the Pyramid, McGucket is among them. No longer a figure to be pitied at the edge of things, but a member of the team, present and capable and whole. The man who once tried to forget his way out of fear ends the story by walking directly toward the largest fear the town has ever faced, which is, when you weigh it, the exact opposite of the philosophy he built a cult to spread. Begin with a lie, because that is where the Northwest family begins. Not a small lie, not a convenient one told once and forgotten, but a foundational fiction, the kind a family builds a house on top of and then spends generations pretending is bedrock. In the episode called Irrational Treasure, which first aired on the 17th of August, 2012, as the 8th episode of Season 1, Dipper and Mabel pull that fiction into the light. They uncover evidence that Nathaniel Northwest, the man credited across the town of Gravity Falls as its founder, the man whose name Pacifica carries like a crown, was in truth the town's manure-shoveling village idiot. That is the ancestor. That is the root of the family tree the Northwests polish and display. Consider what a discovery like that actually costs, not to the child who makes it, but to the family it exposes. The series establishes the shape of the deception carefully. The real founder of Gravity Falls, per that same episode, was Quentin Tremblay III, a man the story introduces with a title so absurd it announces itself as comedy. The 8.5th President of the United States. A fraction of a president, a footnote wearing a sash. And yet the joke conceals something serious because if Tremblay founded the town, then Nathaniel Northwest did not. And every honor the Northwests have collected for over a century rests on a name that was slipped into a chair it never earned. The manure shoveler was promoted to founder. The truth was demoted to a secret. Think about what it takes to keep a secret like that alive. Not for a year, not for a decade, but across generations, long enough that the people maintaining it no longer remember inventing it. This is where Preston Northwest enters, and this is the lens I want to hold him under because it is easy to treat Preston as merely a snob, a rich man with a cruel streak, and to leave it there. He is more structurally interesting than that. Within the series' own family tree, Preston is established as the great-grandson of Nathaniel Northwest, which places Pacifica, his daughter, as Nathaniel's great-great-granddaughter. 4 generations. Preston is not the man who told the first lie. He is the man born into the machinery built to protect it, the inheritor of a story he did not write but is expected to defend with his whole life. That is a curse of its own, and it is worth separating from the literal one the story hands him later. Preston is voiced, as fans usually credit it, by the actor Nathan Fillion, and it is worth pausing on that casting for a moment because it seems to be doing quiet work. That casting reportedly carries Preston across multiple episodes, including The Gulf War, the 3rd episode of Season 2, Northwest Mansion Mystery, the 10th, and the weird McGucket episodes that close the series. What that voice brings is a quality that sounds trustworthy. It is smooth, assured, faintly amused, the voice of a man who has never once doubted that he belongs at the top of the room. That confidence is the point. A cover-up does not survive on nervousness. It survives on the total absence of visible doubt, on a man who can say the family name with such ease that no one thinks to ask where it came from. Preston sounds like a founder. That is the trick. The sound is inherited too. Now move forward to the 2nd season, to Northwest Mansion Mystery, which first aired in 2015, because this is where the family's buried history stops being a matter of records and starts being a matter of blood. Northwest Manor is haunted. The thing haunting it is the vengeful ghost of a lumberjack named Archibald Corduroy. And here the series reaches out and connects a thread it has been holding loosely, because Archibald is an ancestor of Wendy Corduroy. The families are entangled. The town the Northwests pretend to have founded is populated by the descendants of the people the Northwests actually wronged, and one of those descendants has been sweeping floors and cracking jokes near the Pines twins the entire time. The origin of the haunting is the second great lie, and it rhymes with the first. When the mansion was built, the Northwest family made a promise to the lumberjacks who built it. They told those workers they could attend the family's annual party. Then, once construction was finished, once the labor had been extracted and the house stood complete, the Northwests locked the gates and shut them out. The promise was never meant to be kept. It was a tool, a way to get the house built, and the moment the house existed, the tool was discarded along with the men who believed it. Notice the pattern. The first lie stole a founding and gave it to a fool dressed up as a great man. The second lie stole a night of welcome and gave the builders a locked gate instead. Both are the same act at different scales, the Northwests taking what others made and keeping the reward for themselves. What happens to Archibald Corduroy is the hinge the whole episode turns on. He dies in a mudslide, and the series is specific about the cause. The mudslide is the result of deforestation around the mansion's hilltop, which means the very act of clearing the land to raise the Northwest house is what loosens the earth that kills the man who raised it. The house consumes its builder, and with his dying breath, Archibald lays down a curse, a debt with a due date. He curses the Northwest family to return in 150 years and spill their blood if the gates remain closed to the townspeople. Understand the terms of that curse carefully because they are precise. The curse is conditional rather than simple revenge. It does not demand the Northwest be punished for existing, only that they open the gate. The blood is the penalty for keeping the gate shut, which is to say, for repeating the exact crime that created the ghost in the first place. The curse is a mirror held up to the family across a century and a half, asking one question: have you changed? Will you open the door this time? For a century and a half, the answer is no, and Preston is the man in the chair when the clock runs out. This is the moment where his inheritance and the literal curse become the same thing. Because Preston's instinct, the instinct trained into him across 4 generations, is to keep the gate closed. That is what the family does. That is what the family has always done, from the moment they told the Lumberjacks they were welcome and then bolted the doors. Keeping people out is the founding act of being a Northwest, performed again and again, and Preston performs it without hesitation because to him it is simply how the world is arranged. He does not experience it as cruelty. He experiences it as order. The curse is broken by Pacifica. She defies her father and she opens the mansion's gates to let the townspeople in. That is the entire mechanism of the resolution, and its plainness is what makes it land. There is no clever trick to it, no loophole she exploits. The curse asks for one thing, and for that century and a half the family refused to give it, and a child gives it in a single act of disobedience. What Pacifica breaks is not really a supernatural spell. It is the transmission of the lie from one generation to the next. She is the first Northwest in 4 generations to look at the family's founding act and refuse to repeat it. She opens the gate her ancestors closed, and in doing so she pays the oldest debt in the family, not with blood but with the welcome that was owed all along. Set the 2 episodes beside each other and the shape of the whole becomes clear. In Irrational Treasure, the crime is against history and the victim is the truth. Nathaniel Northwest, the manure shoveler, is dressed up as a founder while Quentin Tremblay, the true founder, is written out. In Northwest Mansion Mystery, the crime is against people, and the victim is Archibald Corduroy, buried in mud on the hill, his own hands cleared. The 2 crimes are the same family reflex expressed in different centuries. Take what belongs to others, keep the door shut, polish the name until no one can see the manure under it. Preston is the pure product of that reflex, a man who sounds, in Nathan Fillion's easy and untroubled voice, exactly like the founder his family invented, and who is therefore incapable of imagining that the story might be false. There is a small, warm footnote to all of this that belongs to the real world rather than the fiction, and it is worth leaving here at the end because it cuts pleasantly against everything the character represents. Fillion, who gives Preston his cold and gated confidence, described his own experience recording for the series in the opposite terms entirely. By most accounts, he has described the cast and crew on that episode as remarkably kind. The man who voices the locked gate found, on the other side of the microphone, an open one. The Northwests build their house on a lie and shut out the people who made them what they are. The people who made the Northwests, the animators and writers and performers, describe kindness. It is a quiet reminder that the family's coldness is a construction, a thing assembled deliberately by warm people, held up to the light so that a child and an audience can finally see the lie for what it is and choose to open the gate. There is a rare pleasure in a secret that is designed to be found, not hidden forever, not locked away, but placed in plain sight and left there patiently, waiting for someone to notice that the string of letters at the very end of the credits is not gibberish at all. Gravity Falls understood this pleasure completely. Every episode ends the same quiet way, with the animation gone and the names of the crew scrolling by, and then, at the bottom, a line of capital letters that means nothing until you do a small amount of work. The series never explains it. It simply trusts that you will lean in. Consider the very first one. The pilot, the episode that introduces the town, and the mystery and the 2 children who will spend 2 seasons uncovering both, closes its credits with the line that reads, letter for letter, J'offrf W.R. Judulb Iduf. To an eye that does not know the trick, it is noise. But the trick is one of the oldest in the world. It is a Caesar cipher, named for the way Julius Caesar is said to have shifted his private correspondence. And the shift the series uses is 3 positions. Take each letter and move it 3 places back through the alphabet. The Z becomes W, the H becomes E, the O becomes L. Slowly, if you are doing it by hand on a piece of paper the way the first fans did, the line resolves itself into a greeting. Welcome to Gravity Falls. The very first coded message it ever gives you is an invitation, addressed to anyone willing to accept it. And here is where the design reveals how carefully it was thought through. It does not just leave you to guess which method unlocks the credits. It tells you, though it tells you in a way that also has to be decoded. Near the end of the theme song, in the little musical sting before the episode proper begins, There is a whisper, and the whisper is reversed. Play it forward, and it is a smear of sound. Reverse it, which the fans quickly learn to do, and a voice says, 3 letters back. That is the instruction. That is the key to every credit cipher across the first 6 episodes, spoken aloud at the top of the broadcast for anyone who thought to run the audio backward. The clue to the puzzle at the end is buried at the beginning, and it never once points at either of them. Think about what that arrangement asks of a viewer. It asks you to treat the entire runtime as suspect, to assume that the margins of the show, the credits and the theme and the frozen frames are as loaded with meaning as the dialogue in the middle. This was not an idle assumption. There is a moment at the very end of the opening title sequence in Season 1, a single freeze frame of a journal page, and on that page in the same code are the letters VWDQ, LVQRWZKDWKHVHHPV. The same Caesar shift of 3 unlocks it into a confession that the man at the center of the story is not who he pretends to be. That line was set into the credits early, planted in the title sequence, before the plot that it describes had been revealed to anyone watching. The twist involving the 2 Stans, the secret that reorganizes everything you thought you understood about the Grunkle running the tourist trap, was sitting there in Cipher the whole time, in the one place nobody thought to look because it repeats every single week. The series confessed its biggest secret in its opening, and it confessed it in a form that only the patient could read. That is the emotional engine underneath all of this cryptography, and it is worth dwelling on for a moment. A code is a promise. It promises that there is something on the other side of the effort, and it promises that the effort is possible. Gravity Falls kept that promise every week, and it kept raising the price of admission because after 6 episodes, it changed the lock. Beginning with the 7th episode, Double Dipper, the Caesar cipher retires and a new one takes its place. This one is called Atbash, and it is older still, a substitution that mirrors the alphabet end to end so that A becomes Z, B becomes Y, C becomes X, and so on, until the whole alphabet has been folded back against itself. There is no shifting to count now, there is only the mirror. And exactly as before, the series announces the change where it announced the first one, in the reversed whisper of the theme song. From Double Dipper onward, run the audio backward, and the voice no longer says 3 letters back. It says, switch A with Z. The instruction matches the method. It changed its lock and, in the same breath, handed you the new key, provided you are still listening closely enough to reverse a whisper you had already reversed a dozen times before. The community that had formed around these puzzles felt that changed land in real time. This is the part that is easy to forget now, watching it years later with every answer a search away. When these episodes first aired, nobody had the answers. The credits cipher would appear, and somewhere a viewer with a notepad would start counting letters backward, and it would not work, because the method had changed underneath them. And then someone would try the mirror, and it would resolve, and the word would go out. The whisper would get reversed and confirmed. The people solving these puzzles were solving them together across message boards and comment threads within hours of broadcast, comparing their transcriptions and correcting each other's arithmetic. The series had built a machine for collective attention, and it ran on the simple fact that a puzzle shared is solved faster than a puzzle hoarded. The Atbash run holds through the 13th episode, and then, at the 14th, Bottomless Pit, the lock changes a 3rd time. Now the series reaches for A1Z26, which is the most literal cipher of the 3, almost childlike in its directness. Every letter is simply replaced by its position in the alphabet. A becomes 1, B becomes 2, Z becomes 26. The credits, which had been strings of letters, now become strings of numbers, and to read them you count from the front of the alphabet to find which letter sits at each position. And the whisper, faithful as ever, changes to match. From Bottomless Pit onward, reverse the theme song, and the voice says 26 letters. 3 ciphers, 3 whispers, each one a small, honest signpost pointing at the method for the batch of episodes it introduces. It was teaching a curriculum, and it taught it in order, from the shift to the mirror to the number line. Each lesson harder to spot but simpler to solve once spotted. Within that A1Z26 stretch, there is a small joke that shows how playful the whole apparatus could be, and it does not even live in the credits. In the 16th episode, Carpet Diem, Stan sits the children down for what is meant to be a talk about growing up. And he consults a book, and there is a caption in that book on screen encoded in the Caesar method. Decode it, and it reads that puberty is the greatest mystery of all, and then adds, as if the author of this fictional book could not resist, also, go outside and make friends. It is advice hidden in a cipher, tucked inside a prop, inside a scene about a man failing to explain something delicate to two 12-year-olds. The series is teasing its own audience there, the audience that would pause the frame and copy down the caption and decode it letter by letter, gently suggesting that perhaps there is a world beyond the freeze frame. It is a warm joke, not a cruel one. It loved the people who did this work, and part of loving them was ribbing them. The first season builds toward its finale, and the finale, Gideon Rises, does something that reads like a graduation exam. For its credits, the series does not pick one of the 3 ciphers it has taught you. It layers all of them. The final cryptogram of Season 1 is encoded with A1Z26 and @bash and Caesar, combined, stacked on top of one another so that to read it, you must peel back each method in turn, undoing the number conversion and the mirror and the shift. Everything the season taught you in sequence, you now have to use at once. It is the series' way of confirming that the curriculum was real, that the 3 separate lessons were always meant to be assembled into a single competence. If you had solved the credits every week from the pilot forward, you had, without quite realizing it, been trained for exactly this. And then Season 2 arrives, and with it, the series tears up the entire structure it spent Season 1 building. Beginning with the premiere Scary OK, every episode switches to a keyed Visionaire cipher, and the word keyed is the whole difference. The 3 ciphers of Season 1 were fixed. Once you knew the method for the entire batch, and the whisper told you the method. Visionaire does not work that way. A Visionaire cipher uses a keyword to shift each letter by a varying amount determined by the letters of the key, which means that knowing the method is no longer enough. You also need the specific keyword, and the keyword is different for every single episode. The whisper reflects the change, of course. From Scary OK onward, reverse the theme song, and the voice says, Key Visionaire. But that instruction, unlike its predecessors, is not a complete answer. It tells you the lock, but not the key. The key is hidden somewhere else, and where it is hidden changes every week. Scary OK shows you how the new game is played. The keyword you need to unlock that episode's credits is the word whittle, and whittle is not whispered and not written in the credits. It is written on the wall of Gideon's prison cell inside the episode itself, a detail in the set that you would only think to note if you already suspected that the series hides keys in its own imagery. Find the word on the wall, carry it to the credits, apply it as the Visionaire key, and the cryptogram resolves to a message that is almost tender given everything the first season put its audience through. Welcome back. It had been away between seasons, and it opens its return by making you work to hear it say that it is glad you came back too, and by hiding the means of hearing it inside a jail cell in the background of a scene. What this shift did to the community was raise the difficulty and the intimacy at the same time. Season 1 could be solved by anyone who learned 3 classical ciphers and knew to reverse a whisper. Season 2 could only be solved by someone watching the whole episode with the specific paranoia of a person who believes the walls contain instructions because they did. The puzzle was no longer separate from the story. To solve the credits, you had to have already combed the episode. The margins and the middle had merged. The obsession the series cultivated did not stay on the screen. It could not really, given how it had trained an entire audience to treat the world as a surface with cipher underneath. In the summer of 2016, sometime after the series had ended, the series creator, Alex Hirsch, ran a real scavenger hunt in the physical world, and he called it Cipher Hunt. It ran from the 20th of July to the 2nd of August, and its structure was that of the series poured out into geography. Fans decoded clues, and the clues led to physical locations, and the physical locations held further clues, and the whole chain led toward a single object. A statue of Bill Cipher, the triangular antagonist of the series, buried somewhere in the real world. The clues were not confined to one country. They were planted across the globe, in St. Petersburg in Russia, in Tokyo in Japan, and in several places across the United States, including cities in Oregon and in California. To solve the hunt, the community that had once compared notes on message boards now had to coordinate across continents. sending people to check physical sites, photographing what they found, decoding it together the way they had decoded credits. Except now the freeze frame was a place you could stand in. The hunt ended the way the very first cipher began, with a message found by someone patient enough to look. According to fan accounts, on the 2nd of August, a person going by the name Shadow_Wolfwind on Twitter located the buried statue in a forest near Reedsport, Oregon. Picture the arc of that. It begins with a child or an adult sitting with a notepad in front of a television in 2012, moving the letter Z back 3 places to find the word welcome. It ends 4 years later with a person on their knees in an Oregon forest, having decoded a trail of clues that circled the planet, uncovering an actual object that an actual show had actually buried in the actual ground. The same instinct powers both moments. Something has been hidden on purpose. It can be found. Someone has to be willing to do the work. Beneath the statue, there was a treasure chest, and what it held reads like a reward calibrated exactly to the kind of person who would find it. There was signed merchandise and currency and a journal and USB drives loaded with exclusive content. And there was a note from Alex Hirsch himself, and the note was written so that it could only be read under blacklight. Even at the very end of the very last puzzle, having crossed the country and the world and the alphabet, the reward was one more thing you had to know how to read. One more surface with a secret under it. The statue itself did not stay in the forest. It now lives permanently at a roadside attraction called Confusion Hill in Piercy, California, where anyone can go and stand in front of the thing that thousands of people once decoded their way toward. A physical monument to a habit of attention that a cartoon spent 2 seasons teaching. What the ciphers built in the end was a way of watching. The credits could have simply ended. The theme song could have simply played. Instead, it filled its own quietest moments, the parts most productions treat as dead air, with a promise that patience would be rewarded, and it kept that promise so consistently that its audience stopped believing anything on screen was accidental. A word on a prison wall was a key, a whisper was an instruction. A journal page frozen in the title sequence held a confession the plot would not make for months. The series taught people to lean into the dark corners of a frame, and then, when it was over, it buried a statue in a real forest and trusted that the same people would come looking. They did. They always did. Consider what a con actually requires. Not a lie exactly, because a lie can be caught and disproven. What Bill's cipher trades in is something more durable, a truth told at an angle, a promise whose real meaning sits just outside the light where the other person is looking. Across the series, 3 separate people make a deal with him, and none of them are fools. A child prodigy, a clever boy, and a genuine scientific genius. Each shake his hand believing they understand the terms. The pattern that connects them is not that they were stupid. It is that Bill never needed them to be. He only needed them to want something badly enough that they would stop reading the fine print. Begin with Gideon because his deal shows the machinery at its simplest. In the first season, Gideon summons Bill using a ritual and the second journal, and the timing matters more than the ritual does. He performs this summoning immediately after Stan has humiliated him, chased him out of the mystery shack with a broom for trying to crack the safe. Think about the emotional state Bill is being called into. Gideon is not calm, not deliberating over options. He is furious and cornered and freshly beaten, and that is the exact moment a figure appears offering to solve everything. Bill does not have to create the desperation. He simply arrives at its peak and presents himself as the answer. The deal itself is almost elegant in how lopsided it is. Bill will invade Stan's mind to extract the safe combination so that Gideon can steal the deed to the shack. In exchange, Gideon must help Bill with a favor at some later time, a favor that is never specified. Look closely at the shape of that agreement. One side is concrete, immediate, and desirable. Gideon knows precisely what he is getting and when. The other side is a blank space, an unnamed favor at an unnamed time of an unnamed size. Gideon agrees to it anyway because the thing he wants is right in front of him, and the cost has no visible edges. That blankness is not laziness in the writing. It is the whole trick. A debt you cannot measure is one you cannot refuse in advance because you have nothing to weigh it against. And here's the detail that makes the favor genuinely unsettling rather than merely ominous. It is never revealed. On screen, we never learn what Bill wanted from Gideon because Gideon's side of the bargain is never fulfilled. The story simply moves on and the blank space stays blank. Some viewers treat that as a loose thread, but consider it instead as the point landing exactly where it should. Gideon signed a contract whose most important term he would never get to read, and neither will you. He mortgaged something without knowing its price, and the series refuses to comfort you with the number afterward. What he agreed to is still out there, unpaid and unknown, and that is a far heavier thing than any specific task would have been. The journals understood this danger before Gideon ever acted on it. The third journal carries 2 explicit warnings about Bill's cipher, written plainly for anyone who might come after. Do not summon him under any circumstances, never let him inside your mind. Set those 2 warnings against Gideon's deal and notice that he violates both in a single transaction. He summons Bill, and the favor he trades for is Bill entering a mind, Stan's rather than his own. But the principle is identical. The warnings exist precisely because the man who wrote them had already learned at enormous cost what happens when you invite this thing across those 2 thresholds. Gideon has the second journal in his hands and the third one's lessons written in someone else's blood, in a sense, and the temptation still wins. That is the quiet horror of a good warning. It only works if you read it before you want something. Move forward to the second season, to the episode built around a puppet show, and watch the same technique applied to someone smarter and more sympathetic. Bill offers Dipper a deal to unlock the secrets on Ford's laptop, and again, the structure is a genuine desire meeting a hidden cost. A countdown threatens to erase the laptop's data forever if Dipper refuses, which manufactures the same cornered urgency that Gideon felt after the broom. There's no time to think, the deal insists, only time to decide. In exchange for the laptop's secrets, Bill asks for something he describes only as a puppet. One word, deliberately small, deliberately harmless. A puppet is a prop, a toy, a thing you can spare. Dipper hears the word and fills in a meaning that costs him almost nothing, which is exactly what he is meant to do. Before the handshake, though, Bill does something he did not need to do with Gideon, and it reveals how carefully he reads his marks. He works on Dipper emotionally. He reminds Dipper of the times he sacrificed his own wants for Mabel, and suggests in effect that she never returns the favor. This is not about the laptop at all. It is about lowering Dipper's resistance by finding the private resentment he has been trying not to feel and pressing on it. Bill does not offer Dipper a reason to make the deal. He offers him permission, a sense that he is owed this, that for once he should take something for himself. A good manipulator does not argue you into a choice. He locates the choice you already half want and removes your guilt about it. Then the handshake seals, and the word puppet turns out to mean Dipper's own body. Bill takes full possession and locks Dipper's consciousness out of his own flesh, which is a far greater surrender than the limited access Dipper believed he was granting. Go back to the language and see that Bill never technically lied. A body possessed and puppeteered is, quite literally, a puppet, worked from the inside by another's hand. The deception lives entirely in the gap between what the word means to Dipper and what it means to Bill. Dipper agreed to the true terms. He simply agreed to a version of them that existed only in his own head, and Bill was content to let him keep that version right up until the flames went out. It is worth pausing on the mechanism that makes all of this possible, because it constrains Bill more than it first appears. His deals are only sealed through a physical handshake that ignites in blue flame, and by the character's established rules he cannot force a deal through. The other party has to actually shake his hand. Consider what that means for how he must operate. Bill has no power to simply take. Everything he gains by consent, freely given in the moment the hand closes. This is why the entire apparatus of manipulation exists in the first place. The desperation, the countdown, the blank favor, the small innocent word, the quiet pressure on a boy's loneliness. All of it serves one narrow purpose, which is to get a human being to voluntarily extend a hand. He is not a thief breaking in. He is a salesman who cannot cross the threshold until you invite him, and so he becomes very, very good at making you want to open the door. Which brings the pattern to its origin, to the story of young Stanford Pines revealed late in the second season, where you see how patient this technique can be when Bill has years instead of minutes. He first approaches Ford not as a monster but as a muse, claiming to choose one brilliant mind per century to inspire. Understand how precisely that flattery is aimed. Ford is a man defined by feeling different, by having a gift the world around him did not value. Bill does not tempt him with power or wealth. He tempts him with recognition, with the idea that his difference is not a burden, but a mark of selection, that a higher intelligence looked across all of history and chose him. For a mind starved of exactly that, it is the most disarming offer imaginable, and it does not feel like a deal at all. It feels like being finally seen. Under the Muse arrangement, Bill feeds Ford knowledge of a parallel dimension of paranormal phenomena and guides him toward blueprints for an interdimensional portal to be built beneath his house. The price Ford pays is stated openly, and it echoes the third journal's warning with terrible clarity. In exchange, Bill receives the ability to move freely in and out of Ford's mind. There is that second threshold again, crossed not in a moment of panic but slowly, as part of an ongoing partnership that Ford believes is the great fortune of his life. And his gratitude does not stay level, it escalates into worship as the portal progresses. He collects triangular memorabilia and converts his private study into something like a shrine dedicated to Bill. Watch how the con completes itself here. Bill no longer has to manipulate Ford because Ford has begun manipulating himself, rationalizing and adoring and building, doing the work that a colder Mark would have had to be pushed into. The truth surfaces almost by accident, and it takes a second person to see it. Ford recruits his college friend Fiddleford McGucket to help construct the portal, and during a test, Fiddleford is pulled partway through it. In that instant, he glimpses Bill's true dimension, and the muse dissolves. The persona that claimed to inspire concealed a plan to open a gateway, a door for Bill to come through into their world. Consider that Ford, the actual genius, the man being fed cosmic knowledge nightly, could not see it. It took an outsider briefly and violently exposed to the thing itself to recognize what the whole beautiful arrangement was for. Flattery works best on the person it is aimed at because he is the last one able to doubt it. Everyone else can see the shape of the trap. The chosen mind cannot, precisely because being chosen is the bait. There is a final, oddly human footnote to all of this, on the side of production rather than story. The creator of the series, Alex Hirsch, voices Bill Cipher himself, and he has said on Twitter that the voice is, in his words, just a crummy Lynch impression, a nod to David Lynch's Gordon Cole character from Twin Peaks. Lynch had turned down an offer to voice Bill, so Hirsch imitated him instead. It is a small thing, and yet it fits the character strangely well. The most persuasive voice in Gravity Falls, the one that talks three intelligent people out of their own better judgment, is not some original creation summoned from the void. It is an impression, a mask worn over an absence, a thing pretending to be another thing and doing it well enough that you stop asking what is underneath, which is, in the end, all Bill Cipher ever was. Consider what it takes to answer to the wrong name for 30 years, not for an afternoon, not for a con that ends when the mark walks away, but every single morning in your own kitchen, in your own reflection for 3 decades. The man who runs the Mystery Shack does this. He is called Stanford Pines by tourists, by neighbors, by the 2 children who arrive one summer and come to love him as their great-uncle Stan. And that name is not his. It belongs to his twin brother, the real Stanford, a man none of them have ever met, a man who at that moment is not dead and not present but somewhere else entirely, lost on the other side of a machine. To understand the size of the performance, you have to begin with the accident that set it in motion, and the series does not hand you that accident until very late. It arrives in Season 2, in the flashback-heavy episode built specifically to unpack the brothers' history, airing on Disney XD partway through the season. Only there does the origin come clear. Stanley and Stanford are brothers. Stanford had invited Stanley to Gravity Falls, and then, after some fracture between them, wanted him gone again. They fought. The fight was over Stanford's journal, and in the struggle, Stanley knocked his brother backward through the universe portal. The portal broke immediately after, and Stanford was simply gone, pulled into another dimension with no way back that anyone in that room knew how to open. Think about the shape of that moment for the man left standing. He did not plan it, he did not want it. His hand reached for a book, and his brother vanished into a hole in the world. And then the hole sealed itself. What follows is not a scheme born of greed. It is a response to guilt so total that it reorganizes an entire life around a single unspoken task. For the next 30 years, in secret, Stanley works to reactivate that portal and pull his brother home. Everything else he becomes is built on top of that hidden labor, like a house raised over a buried engine that never stops running. Now here is where the deception begins, and it is worth slowing down to see how strange and how practical it is. To keep working on the portal, Stanley has to stay in his brother's house. To stay in the house, he needs to be someone who belongs there. The neighbors know the house as Stanford's, so Stanley makes a decision that most stories would treat as the crime, and this one treats as the burden. He fakes his own death in a car accident, letting the name Stanley Pines die on paper, and he takes up his brother's name, becoming Stanford Pines, the man of the house, for 30 years. There is a cold logic to it that is almost admirable and almost unbearable at once. He does not merely hide, he erases the version of himself that had the accident, and he steps into the skin of the man he lost. The guilty brother buries his own name so the missing brother's name can keep the lights on. And to keep those lights on, he needs money, and so the house becomes a business. He turns his brother's old home into a tourist trap. He first calls it, with a bluntness the show plays for a grim little laugh, the Murder Hut, before renaming it something that would sell better, the Mystery Shack. The irony sits there waiting for anyone who returns to it later. A house with a real secret buried in the basement, sold to strangers as a house of fake secrets, run by a man performing a fake name over a real grief. What makes this chapter of the story remarkable is not that the deception exists, but that it is total and sustained and pointed at people who have no reason to doubt it. The tourists are easy. Tourists want to be fooled, but Dipper and Mabel are not tourists. They live with him. They eat at his table. They watch him work the register and rig the exhibits and grumble through the days. And to them, he is simply Grunkle Stan, the crusty, cheap, secretly soft old man who took them in. Every ordinary interaction between them and him is, underneath, a performance. He is answering to Stanford. He is a man wearing his brother's identity the way you might wear a coat you never take off, and the children have no idea the coat is not his. The show, to its lasting credit, does not spring this on the audience without warning. It plants the clue in the very first stretch of episodes, hidden in plain sight where a certain kind of viewer would find it and everyone else would sleep past it. In the season, one opening titles there as a cipher, a substitution code of the sort you decode letter by letter, and when you work it out, it names Grunkle Stan plainly as a fraud. From the first episode onward, that sentence is sitting inside the credits telling the patient viewer that the man at the center is not the man he claims to be. The story is honest with you before any character is honest with anyone, and the clues go deeper than the titles, buried in the imagery itself. In the Season 1 episode, Dreamscaperers, the dream demon Bill Cipher reaches back into memory and recalls a figure he names Stanford Pines. Inside Bill's body, where images flash like fragments of film, there is a version of Stan, and on one hand, that version has 6 fingers. 6 fingers, not 5. At the time, it means nothing to a first-time viewer. Later, it means everything. Because the 6-fingered hand belongs to the real Stanford, the man of the journal, the man behind the portal, and its appearance there is a signal that the 6-fingered Stanford and the man running the Mystery Shack were never the same person to begin with. The show hides the twin under a spare finger and trusts you to find it on a second pass. This is the pleasure and the ache of the whole construction. When you return to these early episodes knowing what you know, the deception is everywhere, and the man carrying it never once breaks. He does not slip. He does not confess. Day after day, he simply keeps being Stanford while doing the secret work that might one day make being Stanford unnecessary. The performance holds until it cannot, and the place it finally cracks is the episode immediately before the full explanation, Season 2's Not What He Seems, which takes its title straight from that Season 1 cipher. Here, the truth is exposed to the children not through a speech but through discovery. Dipper and Mabel find a hidden box in Stan's office. Inside are fake identification cards and passports, the paper machinery of a man who has been more than one person. And there is a newspaper clipping with a headline that reads, in effect, that Stan Pines is dead. The children are holding the evidence of a death that did not happen next to the false papers of a life that was invented to replace it. In that instant, the great uncle they trusted becomes a stranger whose real name they do not know. And then the machine he has been secretly tending for 30 years finally does what he built it to do. In that same episode, out of the portal, the real Stanford emerges. After 3 decades in another dimension, the missing brother steps back into the room. He does not weep with gratitude, he punches Stan. And he is furious to learn that his brother has spent the last 30 years walking around as him, using his name, being Stanford to the whole town. Consider the collision of feeling in that moment from both sides. One brother has given 3 decades of his life to opening that door out of guilt and love. The other brother has spent those same decades trapped and alone, and returns to find his very identity has been worn and used and lived in by the man who put him through the portal in the first place. Neither is simply right. The reunion is a wound, not a resolution. For Dipper and Mabel, even this is not the whole truth. They have seen the false papers, they have seen a second identical man come out of a machine. But the full account, the who and the why and the how, does not arrive until the next episode, the flashback-heavy hour that follows. Only there do the children learn what the audience is learning alongside them, that the man who raised them all summer is named Stanley, not Stanford, and that he had a twin brother trapped in another dimension, and that everything about the name and the death and the shack was scaffolding built around one hidden rescue. The revelation is structured with real care. First the false papers, then the returning twin, then, and only then, the story that makes sense of both. There is a detail from the real world that quietly deepens all of this, and it is the kind of thing you can only appreciate once the swap is out in the open. The 2 brothers look identical on screen, but they are voiced by 2 different people. Alex Hirsch, the series creator, voices Stan himself, the Stanley we have known all along. The real Stanford, once he emerges, is voiced by the actor J.K. Simmons, an entirely separate performer. So the moment the true Stanford steps out of the portal, the series tells you these are 2 men, and in the same stroke lets you hear it. 2 identical faces, 2 different voices. The disguise that fooled the town for 30 years is undone for the audience in the simple fact of a new voice speaking. And because Gravity Falls is a show that loves symmetry, the twin Swap It built its early mystery on comes back one last time at the very end. In the series finale, Weird McGucket 3, the brothers use the confusion against their enemy. After Bill Cipher is distracted, Stan and Ford secretly change places again, a quiet echo of the swap that started everything. The show hides the tell in the same spot it always did. A close look at the hand of the man the villain believes is Stan reveals 6 fingers on that hand. 6 fingers, which means it is not Stanley at all. It is Stanford standing in his brother's place, wearing his brother's identity now by choice and by plan rather than by grief. The trick that began as a 30-year deception becomes, at the end, a weapon the 2 of them wield together. What this chapter of the story asks you to hold is the strange moral weight of a lie told out of love. Stanley steals his brother's name, fakes his own death, deceives an entire town, and keeps the truth from the 2 children who trust him most. By any plain accounting, he is a fraud, and yet every piece of the fraud exists to serve a rescue he tells no one about. A machine he tends alone in the dark under a house full of manufactured mysteries. The name on the door is not his. The death in the newspaper is not real. The shack sells secrets that are invented while it hides one that is not. And the man at the center of it holds the whole arrangement together silently for 30 years, so that one day the door might open and give him back the brother he lost. There is a particular pleasure in watching an audience solve a mystery the makers thought they had hidden well. Gravity Falls spent years building a puzzle around a set of journals and the person who wrote them, and for most of that time the series behaved as though the answer were locked away somewhere safe. It was not. Long before the writers were ready to say it aloud, a large part of the people watching had already worked out the shape of the secret, and the story of how they did it is, in its own quiet way, as interesting as the secret itself. Alex Hirsch, who created the series, later described the situation with something close to astonishment. He said that fans had begun speculating that the character known as Grunkle Stan had a hidden twin brother as early as the first season, around the episode called Carpet DM, which aired in April of 2013. That is remarkably early. Consider where the series was at that point. Season 1 was still unfolding, the journals were still a source of Monster of the Week wonder, and the larger architecture of the plot had barely announced itself. And yet, in the middle of all that, a portion of the audience had already begun to suspect that the whole thing turned on a second man who looked like Stan and had never been shown. Hirsch put the figure plainly. He said, in effect, that half of the fandom had already figured the mystery out before the series ever confirmed it. Consider what that does to the people making the series. You have built a long game. You have planted your clues carefully, expecting them to be assembled slowly over seasons, and then you look up and discover that a great many viewers have already assembled them and are simply waiting, patiently or not, for you to catch up. It is a strange position to be in. It is the position of a magician who realizes that the front row has been reading his sleeves. What made this possible was the way the fandom chose to work. Hirsch described the investigations into the twin brother theory in terms that sound almost comic when you first hear them, and then, on reflection, sound entirely serious. He said fans produced PowerPoint presentations, flowcharts, and timelines. He called it probably the first time a Disney television show had been analyzed like the Zapruder film. That comparison is worth sitting with. The Zapruder film is the small strip of footage most associated with obsessive frame-by-frame study, the image scrutinized to the point where every blur and shadow becomes a subject of argument. To say that a cartoon about two children spending a summer with their great-uncle was being examined that way is to say that the audience had stopped watching in the ordinary sense. They were reading it forensically, treating each frame as potential evidence rather than entertainment. And the evidence they gathered was real. This is the part that makes the whole enterprise more than wishful pattern seeking. The clues existed. Take the license plate on Stan's car. It reads, fans noticed, in a shorthand that seems to spell out a version of the name Stanley. But everywhere else, the writers called the man Stanford. Those two names cannot both be casually true. A viewer who noticed the plate and held it against the name used in dialogue was looking at a genuine inconsistency, and the natural way to resolve an inconsistency like that is to suppose that there are two people, one called Stanley and one called Stanford, and that the series has been quietly letting the wrong name stand. The plate was not a mistake, it was a seed, and some fraction of the audience found it and understood what it was. There were others. Fans pointed back to the episode called The Time Traveler's Pig, which aired in August of 2012, where a flashback contains, in the background, a second silhouette dressed much like the character in the foreground. A second figure, similarly outfitted, standing where a twin might stand. On a first viewing, you would never register it. On a fifth, with the theory already in your head and your finger on the pause button, it becomes something you cannot unsee. And earlier still, in the third episode of the whole series, Headhunters, from June of 2012, fans noted Stan's unusually strong attachment to a wax figure of himself. A grown man clinging to a wax double of his own face is, in the ordinary reading, a joke about vanity. In the forensic reading, it becomes a clue about a hidden double, an emotional tell about someone who has spent his life haunted by the idea of another version of himself. The show gave them a wax twin long before it gave them a real one. None of these clues by itself proves anything. That is the nature of this kind of work. A vanity plate, a background silhouette, a wax figure, each is deniable on its own. Each is the sort of thing a defensive writer could wave away as coincidence. But laid side by side, arranged on a flowchart, connected by lines drawn between timelines, they stop being coincidences and start being a pattern. This is what the PowerPoint presentations were for. They were not decoration, they were the method by which scattered, deniable details were made to sit together until the shape they described could no longer be ignored. Faced with an audience that would not stop closing in, the writers made a decision that tells you a great deal about how the pressure felt from the inside. Hirsch said that because so many fans had already solved the mystery, they could not wait all season, and so they revealed the twin brother twist halfway through season 2, rather than saving it for the end. That is a real cost. A creator plans a reveal for a particular moment because the timing is part of the effect, and to move it earlier is to give up something you cannot get back. The audience had, in effect, forced the pace of the story. The mystery had been solved faster than it could be told, and the only honest response was to tell it sooner. But before that surrender, there was a counterattack, and it is one of the more remarkable things a showrunner has ever done to his own fans. In April of 2013, only days after the theorizing had reached the point Hirsch would later mark as its beginning, he went, anonymously, to a discussion thread about the series on the message board known as 4chan, on its board for comics and cartoons, and posted a fabricated leaked animation frame. He claimed he had photographed it during a tour of the Disney television animation offices. It was a lie built with real care. The image did not show Stan's brother at all. It showed a minor character, the eccentric hermit called Old Man McGucket, writing in the journals, and it came complete with a fabricated production code and a fabricated timestamp, the small marks of authenticity that make a leak feel stolen rather than staged. The purpose was misdirection, and the craft of it went deeper than a single drawing. The fake frame was staged using an actual frame concept from a Season 2 episode, repurposed and bent toward a false conclusion. So it was not simply invented from nothing, it was a real piece of the series' future, lifted out of its true context and dressed up to point the audience away from the twin brother and toward McGucket as the secret author of the journals. Hirsch was not just lying to his fans, he was lying to them with genuine material from his own production, which is a far more convincing kind of lie. Then he added the final touch, the piece that turned a hoax into theater. After posting the image, he sent a message from his own public Twitter account reading that he was fuming right now, and hours later he deleted it. To the fans watching, this was not a denial, it was the opposite. A creator publicly furious about a leak, then scrambling to erase the evidence of his own reaction, reads as a man who has just been genuinely caught out. The deletion confirmed the leak more powerfully than any statement could have. Fans took the vanished tweet as unintentional confirmation that the image was real, which was, of course, exactly what the tweet had been designed to make them feel. The anger was a performance. The regret was a performance. The whole small drama of the offended showrunner was a stage set to make a false clue feel stolen and true, and it worked for a long time. The McGucket hoax was posted more than a year before Season 2 even premiered, and Season 2 did not arrive until August of 2014. So this false lead was allowed to circulate through the fandom for over a year, a deliberate piece of noise planted in the middle of the audience's careful signal. Picture what that year of investigation looked like from the inside. Every flowchart drawn during that stretch had to account for the McGucket frame. Every timeline had to find room for it. A portion of the audience's brilliant, obsessive labor was, without their knowing, being spent chasing a ghost their own showrunner had drawn by hand and set loose among them. That is the detail that makes the hoax more than a prank. Hirsch did not simply try to hide the answer. He respected his audience enough to fight them, to treat their intelligence as something worth actively opposing rather than merely outrunning. There's a strange compliment buried in that. You do not build an elaborate forgery, complete with fake production codes and a staged emotional meltdown on social media, for an audience you think is easy to fool. You build it for the ones you already know have flowcharts. The hoax was, in its way, an acknowledgement that the front row had been reading his sleeves and a decision to sew a false card into them. When the truth finally came, it came in 2 stages, and the numbers around it show that by then, the whole fandom, the ones who had solved it and the ones who had been fooled, and the ones who had simply been waiting, were watching together. The episode that ends on the cliffhanger revealing that Stan has a twin brother, called Not What He Seems, aired in March of 2015. It was watched by just over 2 million viewers on the day it aired, with roughly another million streaming it online, and it became the most watched telecast in the history of Disney XD at that time. The mystery that a background silhouette and a vanity plate had first suggested years earlier had grown into the largest audience the channel had ever gathered. Then, months later, in July of 2015, came the episode that answered the deeper question, which finally reveals the twin brothers' full name and confirms that Stanford Pines called Ford is the author of the journals. It drew nearly 2 million viewers and set a viewership record for the channel in its own right. The answer the fandom had been circling since Season 1 was now simply canon, spoken plainly on screen, and the years of PowerPoints and flowcharts and paused frames resolved at last into a single confirmed fact. After it aired, Hirsch closed the loop on his own deception with a kind of showman's honesty. He confirmed the hoax by posting the uncropped version of the leaked photo, the full image that the cropped fake had been cut from. and the full frame showed him posing next to the fake animation cell, the drawing he had made himself, standing beside his own forgery. The joke, held for more than a year, was finally allowed to land. The furious tweet, the deleted evidence, the fabricated production code, all of it was revealed at once to have been theater. And the man who had played the outraged victim of a leak stepped out to take a small bow beside the thing he had drawn to fool them. There is one last fact that reframes the entire chase, and it is the one worth holding on to as this settles. The twin brother was not a late invention, not something the writers added once they saw where the story could go. The character had been part of Hirsch's original pitch for the series to Disney, present before the first episode ever aired, which means the thing the fandom spent years decoding, the secret they built their charts around, had been there from the very beginning, folded into the concept from the start. The audience was not guessing at a mystery the writers were still making up. They were reverse engineering a plan that had existed all along, reading a design backward toward its origin and arriving, clue by patient clue, at the answer that had been waiting for them since before the first episode aired. There is a version of this story that begins with a monster, and that version is comforting. Because monsters arrive from outside, they break in. They are somebody else's fault. The chapter of Gravity Falls that ends the summer does not work that way, and the discomfort of it is exactly why it lasts. The door Bill Cipher walks through is not forced. It is opened gently by a 12-year-old girl who wants nothing more sinister than for the good thing she is living inside to keep going. To understand how the end of the world arrives, you have to first understand a wish, and to understand the wish, you have to understand how quietly it was kept. Start, though, with the warning that nobody could act on in time. In the 15th episode of Season 2, Ford falls asleep and finds himself in a wheat field, and the wheat begins to move. It does not sway the way wheat sways. It flattens deliberately into a shape, and the shape is a triangle, and the triangle is Bill Cipher's silhouette pressed into the landscape like a brand into skin. Then Bill appears and greets him as an old pal, and there is a terrible intimacy in that phrase because it is true. These two have history. Bill tells him, in effect, that he has been busy, that he has been making deals, that he is preparing for what he calls the big day. Everything about the scene is a countdown that Ford can hear and cannot stop. What Bill shows him next is the object the whole season has been circling. He conjures an image of the interdimensional rift, and he warns Ford, in effect, that Ford cannot protect it forever, and then he throws it down. The image tears the sky. A red triangular portal opens above the field, and the wheat catches fire, and the dream becomes a preview of an outcome rather than a threat of one. Ford does what a man does when he still believes reason is a weapon. He orders Bill out of his mind. He tells him he has no dominion in the real world. Bill answers with two small words, "Not now," and then adds that things can change. And as he leaves through the portal, he says it once more, things change. Consider how little menace is in that phrasing and how much dread it carries anyway. It is not a boast, it is a forecast. Ford wakes and tells himself he has to warn his family, and here the machinery of the season turns from prophecy toward prevention. He calls a meeting and asks Dipper and Mabel what they know about Bill Cipher, and the twins recount their own earlier run-ins with the triangle. And for a moment, the family is doing the sensible thing, pooling what it knows against a shared danger. Ford explains that Bill is growing in power, and that the Mystery Shack can be shielded from him using certain magic ingredients, and that one of those ingredients is unicorn hair. It sounds, on its surface, like a fairy tale, and the series lets it sound that way for exactly one beat before it turns the fairy tale into a test. Because unicorn hair, according to Journal 1, cannot simply be taken. It can only be taken by someone who is pure of heart. Sit with the plot mechanics of that for a second, because the series has just built a lock that opens only for a certain kind of soul, and it is about to hand that lock to Mabel. She volunteers, she says she loves unicorns, and that she is probably the most pure of heart in the room, and there is no reason in that moment to doubt her, least of all for her. Ford agrees. He gives her a crossbow, and he gives her Journal 1, and he sends her off to fetch the one thing that can keep Bill out. The girl assigned to defend the house against corruption is the girl who most believes in her own goodness, and the episode is not mocking that belief. It is measuring it. While Mabel gathers her quest, Ford takes Dipper aside and shows him something he has shown no one, not even Stan, a hidden study on a second basement level, a terminal network with a mind-blocking helmet meant as a backup plan against Bill. Notice how the two errands split along a seam that the season will later rip wide open. Mabel is sent toward the heart, toward purity, toward the soft magic of unicorns. Dipper is drawn downward, toward machinery and secrets, and the adult work of the basement. The twins are already being pulled in different directions, and the series frames it as strategy, as two fronts of the same defense. But a defense that divides a pair is also a rehearsal for their separation. Mabel recruits Candy and Grenda and Wendy for the journey, and Wendy says plainly that she does not believe in unicorns, and only came along to keep the others out of trouble. Keep that line in your pocket because it is the adult voice in the group, the one who has already stopped expecting the world to be enchanted and now simply tries to prevent the enchanted from getting hurt. Then they reach the unicorn. Celesta Belle Bethabel, said to be the last of her kind, examines Mabel's heart, and the verdict is not what the girl who volunteered on the strength of her own goodness expected. The unicorn judges her not pure and tells her in effect to come back when she is. This is the crack, and it is worth being precise about what kind of crack it is. Mabel has never been asked before this to doubt that her heart is a good place. Her whole way of moving through the summer has been an assumption of her own brightness, a confidence that if she loves something hard enough, the loving makes it right. The unicorn does not call her wicked, it simply refuses to certify her. And refusal is a wound of its own to a person who has staked a piece of herself on being pure of heart in a room full of people who agreed she was. The show plants a doubt in her about the goodness of her own wanting, and it plants it early, so that when her wanting turns dangerous, we already know she does not fully trust it either. And what is she wanting? That is the secret this chapter is really about. The desire she keeps from Dipper because she can barely stand to look at it herself. It surfaces 2 episodes later in the 17th episode of Season 2, which carries the almost unbearably plain title, Dipper and Mabel versus the Future. The episode premiered on the 12th of October, 2015 on Disney XD, and it is one of those half hours where you can feel the whole series bending toward its own end. Mabel grows distraught, and the reasons stack up on her one after another. Turning 13 means high school. High school means losing time with her friends. And then the worst of it, the thing she was not supposed to find out, that Dipper has secretly agreed to stay in Gravity Falls as Ford's apprentice after the summer ends. Understand the shape of that betrayal from where Mabel is standing. Dipper has not done anything cruel. He has quietly chosen a future that does not have her at the center of it, and he has chosen it without telling her. In the same season she was sent to prove her heart pure and was told she had failed. The person she trusts most has made a private arrangement with the future, and she is the last to know. The secret Dipper kept and the secret Mabel keeps are mirror images. He hid a plan to move forward. She hides a wish to never move at all. Alone and upset, Mabel says it out loud, that she wishes summer could last forever. This is the sentence the whole apocalypse hangs from. And the series gives it to us in an utterly ordinary register, a kid on a bad afternoon wishing time would stop. There is nothing evil in it. Anyone who has stood at the edge of a good season ending has felt some version of it. But she says it into the wrong air at the wrong moment, in a town where wishes have weight, and something is listening. Blandin appears, the time traveler the twins have crossed before, except this Blendin is not himself. Bill Cipher is inside him, wearing him, and the thing wearing a familiar face offers her exactly what she just asked the universe for. He offers to build a time bubble, a device to stop time so that summer never ends. Look at the elegance of the trap, because it is the cruelest thing Bill does in the whole series, and he does it with a smile. He does not tempt Mabel with power or revenge or anything she would recognize as a bad want. He tempts her with the precise contents of her own heart, offered back to her as a gift. The reason the unicorn's verdict matters here is that Mabel has already been told her heart is not pure, and now a stranger is telling her that her heart's deepest wish is achievable and good and only requires one small thing from her: To a girl freshly convinced she might not be as good as she thought, being told her wish can come true is not just tempting. It is a kind of forgiveness. The one small thing is the rift. Bill, still speaking through Blendin's body, convinces Mabel to hand over the interdimensional rift to power the time bubble. This is the same rift Ford saw in his dream, the one Bill warned him he could not protect forever, the one whose image tore open a burning sky. Ford spent the whole season trying to keep it safe, building basements and helmets and shields of unicorn hair. And it leaves his protection not by force and not by theft, but by gift, placed into the hands of the villain by a child who was told the exchange would buy her an endless summer. Mabel hands it over and Bill drops it. The containment breaks, and then he stops pretending. He reveals himself, knocks Mabel out, and this single act, this rift shattering on the ground, triggers the beginning of Weird Mageddon. The end of the world, in Gravity Falls, is not a battle that Bill wins. It is a door that Mabel opens. And the series is careful, almost merciless, about making sure we cannot file this under simple foolishness. She is not stupid. She is not weak. She is a person who wanted the good thing to keep going and was handed, by a creature who understood her better than she understood herself, a way to make it so. Every wrong turn she takes is a right instinct pointed at a lie. She loves her brother, so his secret devastates her. She loves the summer, so its ending frightens her. She loves her friends, so their loss feels like a death. Bill does not corrupt any of that. He simply attaches it to a rift and lets her carry the apocalypse in her own two hands, believing it is a cure. Which brings us to what Bill builds for her once the sky has already broken. During Weird Mageddon, he does not kill Mabel, and he does not at first torment her. He traps her in what the series calls a prison bubble, and inside the bubble is a pocket dimension called Mabelland, and Mabelland is built from her deepest desires. It is an idealized, endless version of childhood, of summer, a place engineered so precisely to her longing that she will never want to leave. Think about what kind of prison that is. It has no bars she would recognize and no pain. From the inside, it is the exact thing she wished for on that bad afternoon. Summer that does not end, delivered in full. Bill's genius as a jailer is that he does not need to hold her against her will. He gives her her will, complete, and lets it hold her instead. This is the darkest reading of the secret Mabel kept, and it is the reading the episode earns. The wish to freeze a good moment forever and the prison of never leaving it are the same object seen from two sides. What Mabel asked for and what Bill gave her are not different in content. They are different only in that one was a daydream and the other was a cage, and the line between them turned out to be almost nothing. To want summer to last forever is, if the want is granted literally and completely, to want to stop. To never grow up is to be preserved, and preservation, past a certain point, is indistinguishable from imprisonment. Mabelland is the wish made real, and the horror of it is that it is the wish honored exactly, with nothing bent or softened. One last thing matters here, which is that the man who made this show has said where the theme came from. Alex Hirsch has traced the idea of growing up without growing apart directly to his own adolescence, and that it represents the emotional core of the series. Hold that against everything this chapter has laid out, and the machinery stops looking like plot and starts looking like confession. The rift, the time bubble, the bubble prison, the unicorn who would not vouch for a heart, these are the ornaments. Underneath them is a very simple and very old fear, the fear that the people you love and the time you shared with them are things you will lose by the ordinary process of getting older, and that there might be some deal, some wish, some frozen summer that could spare you the loss. Bill's Cipher is the answer the series gives to that fear. And the answer is that the deal is real and the deal is the trap. The one who offers to stop time for you is not saving the summer. He is ending the world and letting you think you asked for something smaller. So the secret Mabel hid from Dipper was never a plan or a lie. It was a longing she could not admit because admitting it would have meant admitting that she was afraid of the future he had already quietly chosen. She kept it, and it kept growing, and when a voice in a borrowed body finally said out loud the thing she had only whispered to an empty room, she reached for it. The takeover that follows is enormous, cosmic, a red triangle burning in the sky exactly as Ford dreamed it. but its origin is small enough to hold in one hand. It is a girl who did not want the good thing to end, handed the means to end everything, and told it was the same as making the good thing last. Consider the shape of the trap Bill Cipher builds in the final hour of the series. He has Dipper and Mabel, and he threatens to kill them both unless Ford lets him inside his mind. There is no clever counter to that particular blackmail, no riddle that unmakes it. A man is told that the 2 children he loves will die unless he opens the last door he has spent his whole life keeping shut. Ford agrees. He has to agree. The show does not pretend there is another way out of that room, and that honesty is part of what makes the moment land. The great triangle who has spent 2 seasons winning through knowledge finally wins through simple cruelty, by finding the one lever a person cannot refuse to have pulled. What Bill does not know and cannot know is that the mind he is about to enter is not the mind he was promised. Because in the space between the threat and the surrender, Stan and Ford do something small and enormous. They swap clothes. They learn to sound like each other, each twin imitating the voice of the man he has spent 40 years failing to understand. When Bill steps through the door believing he is walking into the vast, star-charted architecture of Stanford Pines, he is walking instead into the mind of Stanley, the brother nobody wrote down as the genius, the one who was supposed to be the ordinary one. The reason for the swap is a detail that rewards a listener who has been paying attention to the whole series. Ford is immune to the memory-erasing gun. Years ago, a metal plate was set into his head, and that plate makes his memories unreachable to the weapon. Fire the gun at Ford and nothing happens. Stan has no such protection. Stan is, in the plainest sense, the only one of the 2 whose mind can be sacrificed, because his is the only mind the gun can actually erase. The plan depends entirely on the fact that Stan is more vulnerable than his brother, and the brothers turn that vulnerability into the trap itself. The very quality that would normally make Stan the one to protect becomes the reason he is the one who steps forward. Think about the arithmetic the twins are doing in that moment, because it is not the arithmetic of a battle. This is not about who is stronger or faster or better armed. The question is who can afford to lose everything, and the answer, coldly, is Stan. He is the one without the plate in his skull. He is the one the weapon can reach. And so the plan is built around a kind of terrible fairness, that the brother who was always treated as the lesser mind is the only one whose mind is available to be spent. Once Bill is inside, the door closes behind him. He is trapped in Stan's mindscape, thinking he has cornered his enemy, and it is Ford who fires the memory gun. The weapon does exactly what it was built to do. It wipes Stan's memories, and as those memories come apart, Bill comes apart with them, because he has anchored himself inside a mind that is now dissolving around him. The strength that made him a god in the waking world means nothing here. He is a guest in a house that is being demolished with him still inside it, and he did not choose the house. Then comes the beat that turns the whole rescue from a clever trick into something closer to justice. As the wipe destabilizes Bill, Stan's mindscape self, the version of Stan that exists inside his own crumbling mind, punches Bill in the eye. That single punch shatters him. The being who won through cruelty, who reached into a father's love and squeezed, is destroyed not by Ford's science alone, but by Stan's fist, in Stan's own head, in the last moment before that head goes dark. There is something almost gentle in how directly the series stages it. No incantation. A man hits the thing that hurt his family and the thing breaks, but the punch is not free, and it refuses to let you forget the price for even a second. The gun does not distinguish between the enemy and the mind that traps him. When Bill shatters, Stan is left in a mind that has been emptied. He wakes, and he does not know them. He looks at Dipper and does not recognize him. He looks at Mabel and does not recognize her. He looks at Ford, his own twin, the person this entire sacrifice was meant to save, and there is nothing there. Suze, who has loved this man like a father, is a stranger. Stan gave his memories to close a trap, and the trap closed on everything, including the people the memories were made of. Hold that inversion for a moment, because it is the quiet engine of the whole finale. For most of 2 seasons, the secret that defined Stan was the one he was keeping. The false name, the hidden brother, the machine in the basement. Here, at the end, the secret is not something Stan is hiding from the others. It is that he no longer holds any secrets at all, because he no longer holds anything. The man whose entire life was built on what he would not tell you has become a man who cannot tell you anything, not even who you are to him. The last and largest sacrifice of the series is not a thing he does and survives to explain. It is the erasure of the very self that could explain it. There is a lineage to the weapon that carries this weight, and it is worth following back. The memory-erasing gun used on Stan was originally built by Fiddleford McGucket. He did not build it to defeat a demon or to win a war. He built it to erase his own memories, the guilt-inducing ones, the recollection of having helped Ford build the interdimensional portal in the first place. A man who could not live with what he remembered invented a machine to make himself forget, and that private, sorrowful device, born of one man's need to escape his own guilt, becomes the instrument of the finale's greatest act of love. The tool of a coward's flinch, if you were unkind enough to call it that, becomes the tool of the bravest thing anyone in the series does. The show does not comment on this out loud. It simply lets the same object mean two opposite things at two ends of the story and trusts you to notice. The rescue itself, then, is a knot tied out of the whole series. Ford's immunity comes from the plate in his head, which comes from his years lost across dimensions. Stan's vulnerability comes from having lived an ordinary, unprotected human life. The weapon comes from McGucket's guilt over the portal, and the portal is the wound that split the brothers in the first place. Everything that made the twins who they are converges on this single choice, and the choice is Stan's, made in a swapped coat, in a borrowed voice, in the dark of a mind he is about to lose. The finale that holds all of this was called Weird Mageddon 3, Take Back the Falls. It is credited by most accounts to a writing team that included Shion Takeuchi, Mark Rizzo, Jeff Rowe, Josh Weinstein, and Alex Hirsch, with Steven Sandoval as director. It first aired on the 15th of February in 2016 on Disney XD as the series finale. By most tallies, it drew close to 2.5 million viewers, and it is remembered as one of the highest-rated telecasts the network had aired to that point. Those are the numbers of a show ending at the height of its powers, an audience that had followed the mystery to its last room and stayed to watch the door close. And here the production history opens a window that changes how you hear the whole sequence, because it was never the plan for Stan to lose his memory permanently. Alex Hirsch, who created the series and who also voices Stan, said as much directly. He said, in effect, that he loved these characters too much to have them lose it all or actually die. The word he reached for was love, and he used it about drawings, about a cartoon con man with a fez, and he meant it without embarrassment. The man who gave Stan his voice could not bring himself to leave Stan without one. Hirsch's reasoning is more precise than simple sentiment, and it is the kind of thinking that separates a finale that merely shocks from one that holds. He explained that permanently erasing Stan's memory would have punished the wrong people. It would have fallen hardest not on Stan, who would not know what he had lost, but on Ford, on Dipper, on Mabel, the ones left to look at a man who no longer knew them. To keep the memory gone forever would have been to make the children carry that absence out of Gravity Falls and for the rest of their lives, and Hirsch felt that was not a fair thing to ask of them. The loss, permanent, would have been theirs more than his. That is a subtle moral distinction, and it is the right one. A sacrifice that mostly wounds the people it was meant to protect is not quite the clean gift it appears to be. So the finale needed a genuine goodbye. Hirsch wanted Dipper and Mabel to be able to look the real Stan in the eye, the memory-restored Stan, the actual man, and hug him before they climbed onto the bus and left the town behind. Not a stranger wearing Stan's face, not a kindly amnesiac who would learn to love them again from scratch. The Stan who knew exactly who they were and what the summer had been. The whole architecture of the ending bends toward making that hug possible, toward earning back the thing the memory gun took, which brings us to the scrapbook. Back at the Mystery Shack, with Stan sitting there emptied, unable to name the people around him, it is Mabel who tries the thing that works. She shows him her summer scrapbook, the record she kept of everything, page by page, the small, ridiculous private history of one family's strange season. It is not science that reaches him. Ford's gun took the memories, and Ford's knowledge cannot simply put them back. What starts to bring Stan home is a girl showing a man pictures of the life he forgot he had. And the first crack of light does not come from a photograph of a person at all. It comes from a pig. Waddles, Mabel's pig, jumps up onto Stan's lap. And Stan, without thinking, without recognizing anything, says the name. Waddles. The word comes out of him before the knowing does, as if some part of Stan that lives beneath memory kept hold of it. That involuntary syllable is the first sign the memories are returning. Not a grand recognition, not the sight of his own brother's face, but the name of Mabel's pig, spoken by reflex from a place the gun could not quite reach. There is a rightness to that choice which I do not think is accidental. If the series had let Stan snap back at the sight of Ford, it would have made the rescue about the brothers, about the great reconciliation of the two geniuses and the almost genius. Instead, it lets him come back through the smallest, silliest, most ordinary detail of his ordinary heart, a pig on his lap. The mind that Bill dismissed as the lesser one, the mind that had no metal plate because it belonged to the twin nobody protected, turns out to have kept its warmth in the deepest place of all, below thought, below memory, in reflex. Stan is restored not through his intelligence, but through his affection. And that is exactly the correct way for this particular man to find himself again. Critics met the episode as the achievement it was. By most accounts, critics praised the episode highly, describing it as funny, emotional, beautiful, and terrifying in equal measure, which feels like a fair summary of an hour that can hold a demon's cruelty and a pig's name in the same breath. IGN reportedly gave the episode a strongly positive review as well. The reception matched the ambition, a finale that risked erasing its most beloved character and then earned the right to bring him back. There is one last thing to hold on to about the voices, because it deepens the whole sacrifice quietly. Stan is voiced by Alex Hirsch, the creator himself, and Ford is voiced by J.K. Simmons. So the plan where the brothers swap voices, where each learns to sound like the other, was performed by two very different men behind the microphone, one of them the person who invented both twins in the first place. When Stan imitates Ford and Ford imitates Stan, you are hearing a creator lend his own voice to the con that saves his favorite character's brother, and then, at the end, give that same voice back to a man who has to learn his own name again from a pig on his lap. Every character in Gravity Falls carries something they do not say aloud. That has been the quiet argument underneath all of it. Stan wears his brother's name and his own guilt in the same breath. Ford builds a doorway he cannot close and spends 30 years paying for the wonder that opened it. Dipper keeps a journal because a journal is a place to be afraid on paper. Mabel hides how much she fears the end of childhood behind glitter and grappling hooks. Bill is a secret in the shape of a triangle, a flat thing pretending it understands what it is to have a third dimension, which is to say a heart. Even the town keeps its own council, a place built on a treaty nobody remembers signing. What the show understands and what it trusts a child to feel before that child can name it is that a secret is not only a thing hidden. A secret is a form of love held too tightly to speak. Each of these people protects someone by staying silent, and each of them is slowly undone by the silence. Consider what that means for a cartoon about a summer in the woods. It means the mystery was never the monsters. So picture it one more time. The lights of the mystery shack going out, one window at a time, a family inside that finally has nothing left to hide from one another, and the forest around them keeping every other secret it has ever held, patient and dark and waiting for no one. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next.